Cool. All right, that should be working. I'm gonna give this a shot. So everybody, I'm testing some new equipment, courtesy of Giant. Thank you for the excellent microphone. There might be a syncing error, so let me know in the chat if the synchronization of the audio and the video is working well. I'm gonna try also. Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going, Zilla and Red? Yeah, so I'm just trying to see if I can make all this new stuff work. I'll show it to you actually. So we've got this new microphone set up, connected to the Zoom audio over there, and this is the L12 live track. Also got another setup right there, so we can do another microphone. There's three. We can do an entire conversation, do some live conversation and chats. Get this thing set back up. Looks and sounds good, Eric says. That's awesome. That's huge. So I'm here in Minnesota, and we've got fiber. There's fiber internet out in Minnesota, which is crazy. Like that there's basically everywhere around Kansas City and out into the major Midwest. So Minneapolis is pretty far from Kansas City, but at the same time, there's fiber all the way through there. And anywhere that's kind of in the rural sticks, that's where they're having the most fiber. So they're saying, okay, they're laying down fiber, but look into dark fiber. And so Google bought a bunch of unlit cable that they said they found that had been put in supposedly the 70s, but is it really true? Oh man, Iron Man, thank you. I appreciate that you're watching. This is cool. So I have some tabs I'm going to open up. I'm going to see if I can get these to be seen properly. I'm not very good with this OBS software yet. I need to get another monitor so I can put my screen on the other screen, because right now if I use the screen share, then you'll see OBS and you'll deal with that. And then that way you'll learn about what I have to go through in order to use the software. They recommend using a Stream Deck, which I'll get, and it has like buttons you can push, and also it's like the buttons on the A10 Mini Pro. Let me show you that too. So this is the this is the A10 Mini Pro, and it's got basically 4 camera. Oh, I'm so close to the mic. Sorry guys, I'm new with that. 4 inputs for video that can switch, and you can record out to USB onto an SSD like this guy here. Or you can, and by the way, these are the cloud lifters. The cloud lifters make the mics loud enough that you can listen to me breathe like that, so my bad. But with this thing you can also do video switching, and it's pretty sweet. So you can push the buttons live. You can actually, without a computer, you could just use that thing to broadcast, to stream. So that's a pretty sweet little toy. But okay, so I have some articles. You guys remember the last video I made about the Stanfords? And I talked about how the Stanford family, it was like a story about how the Stanford house had made the university. It's not all true, but there's a lot of that stuff that is, read between the lines. There's an important story about that I wanted to bring up, and I hadn't made a video about, so I figured live stream it. The murder of Jane Stanford. And we've talked, if you've watched some of my other podcasts, by the way, I assume now you've gone and you've looked my name up on Spotify and iTunes and whatever else, because I've been doing everyone else's podcast because of all the suppression on this channel. You can find a lot of my videos on Odyssey now too. If you go to Odyssey and you type odyssey.com/Disney or odyssey.com/Hollow Earth or /Tartaria or Tartary or DuckTales, or Matrix or Illuminati or MKUltra. I've tried to take all the best hashtags so that people will eventually find their way there. But yeah, here's the Jane Stanford shtick. So let's go open up display capture. Boom. So, Mrs. Stanford dies suddenly in Hawaii. The end came unexpectedly to the widow of the senator and the joint founder of the university last night. Jane Lathrop Stanford, one of the founders of the university, is dead. Isn't this interesting that we're reading this instead of about Elon Musk buying Twitter today? According to a telegram received this morning by Charles G. Lathrop, Mrs. Stanford passed away suddenly in Honolulu last night. The telegram came from the physician who had been attending Mrs. Stanford during the past few weeks, but beyond the brief warning of Mrs. Stanford's end, it contained no further information as to the cause. The following is the text of the message received to Mrs. Stanford from Honolulu. Mrs. Stanford died suddenly. I think there's a little bit more to that. If you start to look into the Mona Hotel story, it's interesting because they said that she died of heart failure in the official reports, which, everyone was rumoring that she'd been poisoned because she was just poisoned the day before. This is the thing. Let me go back for my emotional emphasis. She was just poisoned the day before, and so this had been a thing that had happened to her. She'd gone to Hawaii already. She'd been poisoned. She vomited her own poison, and she survived that, but she had to get her doctor. And then she was poisoned again. I think her final words were like, "What a horrible way to die," something like that. And you wonder, like, who would want to murder this really rich person? And by the way, this also proves she exists because it's habeas corpus. I mean, we talk so much about all these things. Do we know they're real? Well, when there's a body, it's pretty real. So they wanted a committee to look into it. They didn't. The article here, like, you can't even find the pictures for it from 2003. They're all gone now. But in Stanford Magazine, Susan Wolf, I don't think she realized what she was getting into here by finding out these things. Let me see if I can go to, just skip ahead really quickly for you before I read it. David Starr Jordan was the founding president of Stanford University. Such a sweet and endearing man, clearly. Like, this guy's just really full of bubbles and love and Care Bears. Anyway, he was probably the most important. Oh, let's get into this first so you can have your own ad hominem speculation. He was an anti-militarist since he believed that war itself killed off the best members of the gene pool. and he initially opposed the American involvement in World War I. I mean, it's not like that's wrong necessarily. It's just, his priorities are interesting. So it gets you that he's interested in eugenics. And in California, that was rather common at the time. They were sterilizing the Basque for being Basque and deaf people for being deaf, amongst other things, the Kellogg's associations. So he got in power. He didn't want to leave power. There was definitely a lot of quibbling going on between the both of them. Yeah, see, I'm not even saying this myself. This is Wikipedia. Like, dude. His unity of everything about this guy, like he's kind of a trouble. Oh, was it there? I could even just Wikipedia is so easy now. I mean, everyone wants you to read the cited sources, but in 1905, Jordan launched an apparent cover-up of the murder by poisoning of Jane Stanford. My gosh, it's like just public now. See, again, this all was speculation in my lifetime. Now it's just fact. While vacationing in Oahu, Stanford had suddenly died of strychnine poisoning, according to the local coroner's jury. Jordan then sailed to Hawaii, hired a physician to investigate the case. And by the way, we don't know why or who exactly. I mean, it was just some Magnum PI kind of fake doctor, and declared she had in fact died of heart failure. I think he was like a pill prescribing psychiatrist doctor. A condition where symptoms bear no relation to those which were actually observed. See, heart failure is very different than strychnine poisoning. His motive for doing this had been a subject for speculation. One possibility is that he was simply acting to protect the reputation of the university. Yeah, I mean, because if their founder was a murderer or looked bad, can you say that if they're dead, or do their families, can they still sue you and libel you? Since its finances were precarious and a scandal might have damaged fundraising. Yeah. It's like the Clinton Foundation. He had written the president of Stanford's board of trustees, offered several alternative explanations for Mrs. Stanford's death, and suggested to select whichever would be the most suitable. Since Mrs. Stanford had a difficult relationship with him, and reportedly planned to remove him from his position at the university, he might also have had a personal motive to eliminate suspicions that might have swirled around an unsolved crime. Man, see, there you go. That's the diplomatic article. Jordan's version of Mrs. Stanford's demise was largely accepted until the appearance of several publications in 2003 that emphasized the evidence that she was murdered. But here they also push in psyophacy. Wow, he invented the term psyophacy, systemized ignorance of pseudoscientists. Guess who that refers to, guys? That's one of those pejoratives towards you and me. Okay. So we could go forever through all this. One of the things I'm doing here is showing you my tabs. so that I can close them and you can open them. But if you wanted to start looking into, Dr. Humphreys, who tried to save her, supposedly, he might have been actually on her side, but I get the feeling that the money was where the money was. And she was getting more and more stressful. It was very much one of those Winchester lady things. So yeah, I think that's important. You probably wanted to know about that. So Helios, let's get on to Helios. Helios in the Greek religion and mythology is the god of the personification of the sun. Latinized as Helios. The epithets say Hyperion, the one above, or the Pantheon. The reason I bring on Helios is because there's the Sun City, the sacred cattle, the connections in Odyssey, like everything, the quadriga, this idea of the four horsemen, the Colossus of Rhodes, the old world that was two legs spread apart, right? These are the things that matter. And if you look for Helios in Hebrew, you get On, and that's pretty cool, right? Because the abode of the sun pillar, meaning On, it has to do not just with Helios, but also the obelisk, which is cool. And again, the word On, like we think of the symbol for On, the power symbol. I should look that up actually, like the On power symbol. So you remember, because I think most of you seen this more than you've seen Hebrew, perhaps. But this is the G. If you turn it sideways, I can turn it sideways, but it's like the Disney thing. Instead of backwards, sideways seems to be the way. Turn things on their side, right? So Heliopolis is one of the cities of the sun, and if you start to look into more, Heliorca, and also it was referred to as On. So at the time when they were visiting the city, it was like getting on the road to On. The model of the votive temple gateway at Heliopolis. So pretty cool things in On. The House of Ra. So at some point, Heliopolis became very important because Ra became the most important god. And you could say, because Heliopolis became so important, Ra became the most important god at the time. Because if the city was so powerful that the dynasties that were in charge took over, and they started to subvert other religions in the area, then we start to see the spread of this idea that Seth represented the darkness because it represented foreigners, but also because it represented nomads. And so Helios is sort of the opposing power in the later stages instead of Horus. Even though if you think about it, Horus in time, Cronus is connected to the sun, Jupiter, which is this gas ball. I mean, they've connected them. Now then there's henotheism. So I mean, a lot of this is also just when someone says to you the worship of one god, and they talk about monotheism, think also about henotheism, because this idea that there's a supreme god without denying the existence or possible existence of other lower deities. This is what Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, most religions, really are more henotheistic if they believe in a supreme god. They don't really, if you look at the idea of do not have other gods before me in the Bible, it essentially says, therefore, there are other gods, just don't worship them. Why would you even tell me about your other, why would you worry about other girls, unless they were there? So God is saying, be careful of these other deities, these lower deities. So henotheism is a much more correct term for Western theology. Friedrich Schelling coined the term from Heise, or heno, meaning single or one, as opposed to the mono, and katha. Katha is universal, mono is singular, but in a different sense because it's singular without other, without dynamic. Zoroastrianism, Ahura Mazda is the supreme god, but does not deny the existence of other deities. Yazadas, good agents. Yazadas are something to look into as well. If you look at the angels, did anyone see? There was a video recently that was realistic angels. I'm gonna find that really, just realistic angels. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm just gonna show you this, and someone's gonna get angry about it, but that's all right. This is a video of biblically accurate angels. It's not bad, and you've got the idea of wings made of eyeballs in every direction, and the Torah, right? It's just made up of the biblical scripture. The Word of God has made this thing. Pretty sweet. I don't really have much of a comment there. I just like it. I mean, and yeah, look at the size of the little guy. Can you see there's like that little guy there? Oh yeah, and if you like this, you might like the Green Goblin, I guess. I don't know. So, Aztec Codex. You know what? Really quickly, let me do a little pause here. I'm going to read some of the chat because, yeah, whoa, there's a bunch of chat. So, sync is good. Thanks, guys. Paragon's here. Love you, Paragons. I needed some mods in the chat to keep us safe. Memory Man, love you. Sorry, I've just joined, but can you talk through your theories on what you believe Shakespeare is? Yeah, you know what? Like, let's do some answers. Why not? Let me just really quickly go through. Well, okay, I'll stop there for a second and we'll talk about that. So, Shakespeare, like Tavistock or MK Ultra, is a engineered socio engineering campaign, and it's so interesting and so profound because it's not just to take over society on a simple level. It's a mathematical. It's created by these mathematical alchemists or self-proclaimed alchemists, basically trading pictures of angels like Pokemon cards, you know, playing Magic, like the game, like Magic the Gathering. Like this is a different kind of magic than so many people today think magic is just getting away from technology, which is also silly because magic is the craft. It's just trade secrets. So they were not afraid or object to using technology. They thought that was part of how gold was made and everything else. But they also wanted to control the minds of everyone. And they thought that creating and manifesting certain ideas, you had to imprint them in the language itself. Owen Benjamin, who just did this huge video about the last video I did with Alpha Vedic Podcast, was also talking about this idea of he's like, I know I'm mind controlled because of my language and neurolinguistic programming. That's a very humble and respectable thing to acknowledge. We all are controlled by our language. So Shakespeare created 420 to 500 words based on other languages. And also based on our understanding of those languages from Erasmus, and he was created. Again, Shakespeare was not this actor. Well, Shakespeare was an actor, but his writing wasn't created by him. He was created by a team of people led probably by De Vere, as Alexander Ward has pointed out. It's completely clear that there is a connection there, but also the lawyer Bacon, and then there's so many references to law and the ideas of first thing we do, we get rid of all the lawyers, right? These are all Baconian jokes, but really it's Cecil, and I think that's the most interesting kind of idea, is that Cecil was against theater, so Cecil controlled theater, and in the process took these ideas and created new words. So if you think about MTV and California-isms and Valley Girl, the movie with Nicolas Cage, creating Joss Whedon. Right? Joss Whedon is basically Shakespeare. Like, he's created all of these new ways of communicating, which 16-year-old girls do not really talk like Joss Whedon says. But they now might, or boys will in their 30s because they've watched it. I mean, they've created a new way of communicating. And by doing that, you change, it's like Rastafarianism, except backwards. Because Rastafarianism asks you to think about what you're saying, what the meaning is. So you say, I'm not understanding, I'm overstanding. I'm trying to not be understanding. And I'm not going to say me because that's backwards. We, I'll refer to I. These are kind of silly to some people, but they really are trying to take command of language. Shakespeare does the opposite. Well, he can command the language, but so many people use Shakespeareanisms without understanding what they come from, what they mean. They aren't educated in 4 languages, Greek, Latin, German, etc., in order to understand what these words mean. So we're controlled by language, and Shakespeare is one of the most powerful tools for that. It controls not only language, it controls ideas, and it's embedded itself into other cultures all over the world now. We see this also reiterated by today's standards, because the Beatles, the Monkees, take your pick on Americanisms, West Wing, I don't know. I mean, there's just all these great shows like Good Burger. Okay, so recently, watch Good Burger in French. I just watched Good Burger in French. I have it somewhere. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you know what? Grab it. Why not? So, Good Burger. Amazing movie, right? I mean, but what is this movie? It's created with these kids who were improv artists from Atlanta, brought to Florida, to a place where basically nobody lives. And they have all these commercials like, come out to Orlando, beautiful Orlando, where there's basically a hotel and like a wet couch, and you don't really want to be there, and you're stuck there because your family don't have a job, and their only job is to make sure you're an actor. So they get all these kids, and then they round them up and they put them into this movie. They create this studio town, which is a fake town in a swamp, and then they make it act like it's it's anywhere in America. And then the language they create, because it's not written by Keenan or Kel, right? So the new lexicons and the false ebonics that are created for this film. But then there's this new character who's this surfer kind of dude, even though he's not a surfer because he could be in the Midwest or anywhere. And he's a dude, and she's a dude, and we're all dudes, right? I'm a dude, he's a dude, she's a dude, because we're all dudes. So it's the beginning of that idea of the singular dude, the removal of gender, the they, but also when you look at, I mean, the reason I was so curious was because I wanted to see it in French or in Spanish, because do you say thou? Do you say te? Vos or te? Are you say or vous? Are you going to use the formal, or do you use the feminine or the masculine? These things matter in another language. Would you say do-da and do-do? Like, what were they going to do? And so what did they do? Like, in the entire movie, the only parts that are in English, and they still have the same dubbed voice saying it, he, in English, says, I'm a dude, he's a dude, she's a dude, because it's an idea. It's not just language. It's an idea. All right, so I don't know if that answered anything about Shakespeare. I mean, that was just kind of my thought. And you can ask me if I didn't explain more. And yeah, tell Owen Benjamin, let's definitely chat. I was talking to him on Instagram. Interesting person. Some of the stuff he's researching right now is actually really important, I would say. Most people are hung up on things from a few years ago that he's completely debunking right now. So, good for him. Let's see. I haven't kept up. Yeah, keep up, man. You gotta keep up. The Electric Universe. Yes, very important. Although, video games, the idea of everything being inside of this simulation that we visualize as a turtle, and it turns out to be conscious, that's another thing that's interesting. The Electric Universe is really cool because we can just mathematically say, well, everything is blah, 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 which is, it breaks any argument. But consciousness is the root of the Veda. Everyone's saying in the Veda that there are all these gods because they've taken over these lands, similar to Catholicism or similar to the last religion we were talking about 20 minutes ago. But they now have created a religion that's encompassing all these other gods. It's really still about creation, existence, destruction, the Trimurti. And so in that you have consciousness builds up. It's very much like the Mormons talk about this idea that you become a hyper sigil of this, you become an agent of God, or whatever, this kind of angel. But it's not the same as being the supreme God. But it might be more aligned with what we understand in terms of physics, fusion, stars. These ideas that we're talking about, even in just a flat plane of existence, are conscious. Everything is conscious. The Earth is conscious, right? And that's on a certain level. But if you think about how things are connected together, the root systems and everything, life is a lot more than just humanity. We're an entire ecosystem. The sky clock. Ooh, careful, Rune Dragon. Saros cycle. Yeah, I need to look into the Saros cycle. Someone, Jolly Man, tell me more about the Saros cycle. And while y'all do that, I'm going to go back to some articles for a second. So, Aztec codices. So the Mexicoatl Amaxtli, I think, and someone can tell me if I said that close at all, the Mesoamerican manuscripts made by the pre-Columbian Aztecs and their Nahuatl-speaking descendants during the colonial period in Mexico. So these are from supposedly the 1600s, but they're about things from before that. They use original symbols. Here's numerics, and each one. So the way these work are, the symbol makes a sound of the animal that's associated in the mind with the noise, and then the rest of the word is created because there's like 200 different symbols, and then another 60 or 160 different numerics. But mainly they use dots they use dots and lines to do numbers. So using calendars, and you can see, this is that story about the eagle on top of the cactus rock. But what is this, right? I mean, let's go back down there. Yeah, that's what's going on there. So, you get this idea that there was a lot of violence, that at the same time as the West, or it's funny to call it the West. I guess at the same time Europe is having its dark ages and bloody periods and crusades and wars and apocalypse, Armageddon. So looks like the period of the Mayans and the Aztecs, they're losing their culture. They're having sacrifices because they don't have enough agriculture, and they're going insane as well. So it's interesting because so much of the narrative has been, oh, well, they didn't have anything together, or whatever they had had collapsed by the time we got there. Well, isn't that kind of the same thing that's going on in Europe, right? You have people that have boats from other places that they figured out how to make, the Arab boats that Spain and Portugal are using. So the Masons and the Moors, Moorish sciences, the Academy, when people refer to Freemasonry, they sometimes refer to it as the Moorish sciences. This is interesting because there's this connection between Mormonism and Islam, and also Mormonism and Masonry. And the idea of the Moors being, they're wall builders. We connect them often with Muslim, but it's not necessarily correct, because Islam is a later term, or rather it was a later religion. It could have just been the terminology used for anyone who is a disciplined man or a disciplined person. So, for instance, in Timbuktu, we talk about the Islammed, or the Islamicized gentleman. This was a term that existed before the 7th century, so it's not likely that it meant specifically to have become a Muhammadan, right? Which is also a term that starts to emerge, is to be someone who's obsessed with Muhammad, the sweet one. So, Orientalist Stanley Lane Poole acknowledged the great impact of Moorish civilization had on Europe when he wrote, "For nearly 8 centuries under her Muslim rulers, Spain set to all Europe a shining example of a civilized and enlightened state. Art, literature, and sciences prospered as they prospered nowhere else in Europe. Students flocked from France and Germany and England to drink from the fountains." So now we're looking at how the rest of Europe started to get its ideas from the Moors, and that the Moors were interested then in these other places and were going to these places. And this becomes more important as we start to look into Tudors, Black Tudors, and Black British, because they're supposedly non-existent, but it's just not true. So the surgeons and doctors of Andalusia were the vanguards of science. Women were encouraged to devote themselves to serious study. And a lady doctor was not unknown amongst the people of Cordoba. Imagine Cordoba. So imagine a lady doctor in the 7th century, the 15th century. It's just at a time when they were making, all these accusations of the opposite. So how's that for your Taliban? So 19th century French writer on esoteric sciences, Gerard Uncus, says that, known as the Papists, noted that the Gnostic sects, the Arabs, the Alchemists, and the Templars, form a chain transmitting ancient wisdom to the West. This explains why within the ritual Freemasonry there is an admission: "We came from the East and proceeded to the West," a Masonic author, Bernard H. Springett, says. The plain fact that much of what we now look upon almost entirely as Freemasonry has been practiced as part and parcel of the religions of the Middle East for many thousands of years. It lies open for anyone who cares to stop and read instead of running by, but it is frequently and scornfully rejected by the average Masonic student. So this is, again, and that's an important point. Masons do not necessarily recognize, in the greatest majority, not every Mason is going to recognize their connections to more sciences. But this is also why Masonry has been and why the world has been so singularly opposed to racism amongst camaraderie, amongst brotherhood. If you look at the videos on Freemasonry, they really push this idea that there are brothers from all of the tribes, right? So I think it's important to understand that that's not always true. There's a lot of lodges. I mean, we talked to Leo Zagami about this idea that there are so many independent lodges that are not really interested in following along with the rest of the world's Masonic traditions or whatever. So they're on their own, but there are, in the Midwest and stuff, there are crazy lodges that have existed for maybe a couple hundred years and have tangented, and that explains things like the KKK or other groups in that light. But let's look into the Sufis. So, the founders of the American Republic, as high-degree Freemasons, were aware of the importance of Moorish wisdom and the culture to the birth of Western civilization. This may explain why Morocco was the first nation in history to recognize the United States, and what's really behind the story of George Washington being presented with a Moorish flag, aka the cherry tree. Some researchers believe the flag consisted of a red background with a green 5-pointed star in the center of it. The star, or pentagram, which the Moors call the seal of Suleiman, and colored green to honor Islam, also figures prominently in Masonic art and architecture. Colored green to honor Islam. That might be something that we need to open another tab about. Look that up. What you guys have? Oh, I mean, search with DuckDuckGo. Yeah, there you go. Color green. Well, that's true. I mean, we know that. Look at all this green stuff. A lot of green going on. Yeah, that's right. That checks out. Yeah, that tracks. Okay. All right, so tell me, what is the green about? There's probably like a few people in the audience who know this better than me. A number of traditions associated in Islam and the Quran associated with paradise. Oh, maybe like the peacock or nature. The 12th century, green was the dynastic color of the Shiite. And the Fatimids, in contrast to the black used by the Sunnite and the Abbasids. The Sunnite Abbasids. After the Fatimid dynastic color, green remains particularly popular in the Shiite iconography, but it is also widely used by the Sunni states, notably in the flag of Saudi Arabia and the flag of Pakistan. Reclining on green, cushions and rich carpets of beauty. Surah 55, verse 76. Upon them will be green garments of fine silk and heavy brocade, and they will be adorned with bracelets of silver, and their Lord will give them to drink a water pure and holy. Now, this is probably going to annoy somebody, but I'm going to do it anyway. Hold on. What is the in China green dress? Isn't that a thing? Anybody remember this? Is this old? I'm not even spelling the word right. It's embarrassing. Yeah, the green dress code, right? At one point, prostitutes wore a green dress. That was a thing. It was like, your mother wears a green dress is like a Chinese insult to lay at someone. So your mother wears a green dress. And so, I don't know, random apophenia, but just the idea that they will be wearing green silk. I've seen some ladies in green silk on Sutter Boulevard. Green was used as the color of the banners of the historic Fatimid Caliphate. The Fatimid banner was used until 1171, and thus, during the first century of the Crusades, and by this way, has taken influence on Christian heraldry, where the tincture vert. Oh, yeah, good point. Because I've seen priests wear green a lot. But I mean, I guess green could be, I was thinking like a Celtic color. So that's an interesting thing. The connection between Celts and emerald and green. Green's come up recently. I did an episode recently on the Emerald City of Oz, which will be coming out soon. What? That's really what that's what it suggests that you look for? Google, I'm ashamed of you. That's terrible. Wikipedia? Doesn't even make sense. When Freemasons traveled in the Moorish lands and encountered Sufis, the mystics of Islam, they soon recognized a common bond. Sufism, said Sir Richard Burton, was the eastern parent of Freemasonry. Oh, okay. I get it now. I get what happened. John Porter Brown, an American diplomat in Turkey in the mid-1800s, was a Freemason who wrote sympathetically of the Sufi path. In the Dervishes, he admitted finding it rather strange that the dervishes of the Bektashi order consider themselves quite the same as the Freemasons, and are disposed to fraternize with them. Brown commented on how in Turkey Freemasonry had come to be generally regarded as atheism of the most condemnable character, a position not unlike the one held by Pappus, the celebrated French occultist and Gnostic bishop who tried to counter the Masonic lodges, which he believed were in the service of British imperialism. Hard to argue with that. And the international financial syndicates. There you go. Pappus also viewed Freemasonry as a diabolical perversion of the ancient secret tradition. When Madame Blavatsky set out in the search of hidden wisdom, it was to the Moorish lands of Egypt that she journeyed. Moorish, huh? I was always thinking them as Kemetic, but Blavatsky claimed to be a disciple of the masters Moria and Kuthumi. The researchers K. Paulson Johnson convincingly showed her tales of the masters to be modeled on real people, many genuine occult adepts. Prominent amongst them, Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani. Oh, yeah. Who's a Sufi scholar. He's important. I think I have a tab on him open already, just in case. Let's get that open, put him somewhere. There we go. Cool. A Sufi scholar, tireless political intriguer, and the leader of a radical movement throughout the Muslim world, whose travels enigmatically paralleled those of Madame Blavatsky for more than 30 years. Best remembered for co-founding the Theosophical Society and helping to popularize Buddhism and Hinduism in the West. Blavatsky also proudly wrote of living in the whirling dervishes with the dews in the Mount Lebanon. I'm going to really quickly show Wizard of Oz because I just did this episode with David Plate and Rising from the Ashes, and another guy for his name, but he was awesome. And in that show, we talk about how Wizard of Oz was created by Baum, whose mother, his mother-in-law, was a member of the Theosophical Society. He became a member himself, and Wizard of Oz was literally about Blavatsky as a little girl. I mean, this is Madame Blavatsky in Oz, right? And Oz means strength in Hebrew. There's a lot going on there. And there was another Oz movie. Actually, I could probably pull that up and get away with it, right? Like 1914. Is that right? No, not 1014. Patchwork Girl of Oz. Check this out for a quick second. I'll just leave that. Look at this. How to get some water. So, I mean, by the making of The Wizard of Oz, there had already been like 10 Wizard of Oz films. I think there's like 4 of them that we found. There's probably more out there, but there were 14 books. So, and the effects of them, they're pretty good, actually, these stories. And one of the weird ones is that after Dorothy, there's Gillikin, and Gillikin's this boy who is an orphan and has to help find the princess, Ozma. And he looks and looks and looks, and eventually he realizes, get this, he's the princess, right? So that's like the first trans superhero kind of story right there. And it's pretty weird. Like a 13-year-old boy goes through a bat mitzvah. You know, that's basically the story. And there's just wow. I mean, yeah, this is great. I love that they made this movie. Okay. Well, that was a little bit of a tangent, but look into Blavatsky, and then we're going to jump in past Blavatsky. We can do it another time. Theosophical Society stuff's important, but I'm going to say, look into your Sufis. Hamal al-Din al-Afghani, an Islamic modernist, part of the Pan-Islamic Unity movement. When we think of Islam, we don't think of him, and that's kind of a bummer. This guy's kind of interesting, and he liked the idea of modernism in Islam. So the idea of not quite secularism, but modernism, futurism even. I mean, not really, because you have to understand at the time, modernism wasn't so dilapidated. It was more this idea of building this is why Afghanistan had doctor women and everything, was because this idea that there could be an alternative to he perceived Freemasonry as a means of advancing his anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pan-Islamic causes. Right? So think about that. At some point, there's going to be an article up here that will connect all of this. I don't know how far I have to get to find it, though. Is it here? So many pages. So many pages. Yeah. I'll have to get back to it. Well, there's a thing on the Queen that matters about that. Because basically the Queen of England at the time, in 1589, had made a deal with the Moors. And so you can see the connection between the Masons and the Moors. Because the Masons took over England in 1600 with King James and, from Scotland. And the hats, the little fez, right? So Freemasonry started, with lore and symbols tracing back to ancient Egypt and Phoenicia, but it had a real interest in the Afro-Arab world at the time, especially because the Crusade states during the Crusade Wars, Morocco on. King of Morocco, and we just mentioned this, but let's go deeper. King of Morocco, under the leadership of Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah, known as King Mohammed III, was the first country. Morocco was the first country in the world to recognize the United States as America as an independent nation in 1777. This historic act by the North African Muslim Kingdom highlighted the relationship that existed between America's Masonic leaders and the Moors. Before exploring their strange connection further, we need to understand the part played by the Moors in the transmission of knowledge to Europe. Well, we kind of just went through that. But if you start looking into, again, we've done some episodes on Spain, but the Saracenic world of Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, Toledo in Spain, these are all places that they have giant buildings the size of malls built 1,000 years ago. You start to see that they were the most impressive people, not just now. I mean, not just then, but even now. And 19th century French writers, Uncus, who wrote about the alchemists, was also saying this. So you have these examples. And that was the guy we talked about a second ago. Let's see. Yeah, basically the same article. Okay. So the Black Muslim movement in America. I think this is fascinating, frankly. If you start to look into Prince Hall Freemasonry, it looks like it's the first time. It looks like such a beautiful story. Am I wrong? Someone tell me if I'm missing something here. That the Nation of Islam and Freemasonry, their whole dream is the Moorish sciences and to be unbridled. So it would seem that this is maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this is all just, maybe I'm being a little too optimistic. But it would seem that America had set out to allow this to exist. Not just America, but Brazil particularly. And there's a huge movement of Afro-Caribbean black nationalists associated with the Nation of Islam and with Prince Hall Freemasonry that are also associated today with Kanye West and Jay-Z, right? And the whole community that is the Kanye West has this church also, which is this post-Christian church, right? Which is what is Islam. Again, isn't that kind of their whole goal? So, looking into Elijah Muhammad, 360 degrees of knowledge. Masonry only had 33 degrees of knowledge. That's because 33 degrees of the rose compass, so we need to expand the math. So the Masons were inferior because of their lack of knowledge. Elijah Muhammad, in his book, The Secrets of Freemasonry, states, men of higher knowledge use the term light to describe knowledge, not common to common man. Many of the founding fathers of the country were and still are high-degree Freemasons and Shriners. They have sworn oaths not to reveal what they call secrets. It just so happens that the secrets they are bound by oaths to keep secret just happen to be the truths to free you from and I from our grave of ignorance. So, I mean, the idea that secrets must be kept as Masonic or medieval trade secrets is not in compliance with Islam, which kind of looks like it says the opposite. It depends on your interpretation. Elijah Muhammad was a little chauvinistic in my opinion. Someone don't fight me on that. Just explain to me why I'm wrong. But from my understanding, he was not the progressive that Al-Afghani was. So instead, they were saying we need to return to order and remove this European imperialism, which is tricking us into thinking we're liberated, right? And that makes sense because is European culture liberating? I mean, at this point, if you're working to buy NFTs, I guess we lost, right? So the Moorish Rite, Mariner, peace, love, and blessings. These are just some things I found on the Moorish Rite, and you can start to look into the connections between the colors, again, with green and the Ankh. So it's not a four-leaf clover, you know? And is the OMS religious? Spiritual, but not religious. The OMS is a non... Wait, let me get back. What was it? The Order of the Moorish Star. Is the OMS an androgynous rite? There we go. It is not. It is for women in as so much as men, and women naturally experience peculiar rites of passage specific to each gender, as such experience are not mutually shared. As a complementary rite, the OMS is not by that designation an androgynous component of the Moorish rite, but it is in fact an equal and complementary component. Wow. So in other words, you know, they're not hermaphroditic, or maybe it's more about gender rules in Masonry, and they don't want to confuse people that they're in Britain. You can actually, I think we've seen women, trans men women who become men. Is that right? They're able to become, or you know, whatever that means. They're able to become Masons in Britain, right? That's pretty cool, I guess. I've heard that men sit in women's meetings in Freemasonry, controlling them and telling them what women to do. No, I don't think that's... Okay, what exactly is a Moorish star? Big questions demand big answers. Don't mind if I prelude this one. Now, of course, the expression is a fraternal and symbolic symbol. A physical star, we all know, is an elevated heavenly body, which emanates light which is only detected by our eyes 3 years after its actual emanation. A shadow of the past influencing the present. Don't get me started. Okay, well, I don't know. Not necessary. I'll move past this one. Oh, there we go. Here's that article that I was talking about earlier. The Secret History of Elizabeth I's Alliance with Islam. Catholic Europe shunned England, so the Protestant queen traded with its enemies and changed her country's culture forever. In 1570, Elizabeth I was in a bind. She had been excommunicated by the Pope, and her country was shunned by the rest of Europe. To avoid ruin, England needed allies. The Queen sought help from a surprising source: the Islamic world. All right, just let you kind of think about that for a second. So, shunned by the Catholic Church, which is controlling so much of Europe. Before the Jesuit suppression, during the wars with this created horde that's supposed to be beheading people. I mean, again, they have statues in Catholic churches that are not of Jesus. They're just, I mean, even if they are, it's of Jesus on a horseback killing a guy. You know, I mean, a lot of them are statues of people with a sword slicing the head off a Moor. That's a big part of... Let's just get a picture of that. Spain statue, Spanish beheading Moor. Let me see what I got. Is what we got? Really? No. It's... What if I type in Leon or something like that? I don't know. I should have come to class prepared, guys. I'm sorry. If you look for statues in Spain of a dude beheading statues, let's see. But you know what? The thing is, irony, kids, they're beheading the statues now. All right. So the Tudor period has supplied. The Tudor period had supplied endless popular entertainment from Kate Blanchett's Elizabeth Newton. Now, really, we don't need this. We don't need the Netflix digest. So, Murad III was essential to her self-preservation, yet the story has largely been left out of Tudor history. They really just want you to talk about movies. The reason it's important to me... Let me cut back to my face for a second. The reason it's important to me is because the Queen of England, then, who's not, she has little power, really. She's controlled by these royal houses, and they've further deviated them from the Jesuits. So there's clearly, but the Jesuits ran everything. So what's going on there? There's something going on between the Freemasons and the Jesuits, but the Jesuits were supposed to kill the Knights Templar. There's a Friday the 13th, and they go off to Scotland, right, about 150 years earlier. So you've got some generational wealth there. Theosophist Frank Baum, who we were talking about earlier, he was a Druidic Theosophic. So many of these New Age Druidic ideas that came out of Scotland and Freemasonry in the 15th century, they're trying to rekindle some of those Celtic ideas. So there is a huge connection there, again, between green and emerald, and also Scotland. Even though it's Caledonia, it's connected to the Kemetic studies. And the Queen's looking around and figuring who she's going to make these deals with, and she's made a deal with Muhammad III. Suddenly in Shakespeare, you've got that play, Othello, and Othello it's not about Murad III, it's about his diplomat. I don't know if I can find his diplomat off the top of my head. But she finds a diplomat, and the idea that she might have been having a relationship with him is not really, it's not probable, because she was pretty messed up. She had smallpox and pox and plagues and things, and boils on her face, and her life was pretty messed up. And they'd given her, that cocktail of drugs, including mercury, which they put on her face and had a drink, which was driving her insane. So I don't think it was the romance that the movies will have you believe. But making this deal with the Arabs allowed for the new British Empire. And the new British Empire that includes, it's not a British empire. And more when you look at Britain, you see that the only way to run Britain is to not have a family that came from Britain originally, including Solomon or Muhammad. But really, at the end of the day, if your family came from England, then you would be like a traveler, they call them, which are the gypsies, the friends, they have all kinds of names for the, they make them into the lowest social class. That's how you know those are the indigenous people. So it's interesting that the Aura Sultana, let me pull up her story, the first Muslim woman in Britain, supposedly, not first African, just simply first Muslim. She does have another extraordinary figure, an Englishman who Anthony Jenkins, an Englishman who established a diplomatic and commercial connections with Persia, is on his way back to England, traveling on the Volga River, what we could now call Greater Russia, and Astrakhan. He then buys this woman, Aura Sultana. It's not clear whether this is a slave name or just the name and place from where she comes from, but he takes her back to England. Around the same time, a similar figure is established as a lady-in-waiting in Elizabeth's court. If it's the same person, which the author believes it is, she became a kind of fashion advisor to the Queen, telling the Queen how to wear certain kinds of shoes, materials. Her exotic background made her exactly the kind of person the Queen would say, oh, you've just come back from Moscow. What are the latest catwalk fashions? So you start to see that this also helps the elite by having these characters that are from other places, and it benefits them to bring them into the major court. Here's a figure, Alfred the Great. There's some evidence he was black. King of the West Saxons from 871 to 886. King of the Anglo-Saxons. There's a story that the Danelaw, they killed as many of the royals that they could. They destroyed their language as much as possible. The Frisian, they've now lifted it, and Danish is what's left, and Frisian's different. After ascending the throne, Alfred spent several years fighting Viking invasions. He won a decisive victory in the Battle of Edington in 878 and made an agreement with the Vikings, dividing England between Anglo-Saxon territory and the Viking-ruled Danelaw. The Viking-ruled Danelaw, composed of northern England, the North, East Midlands, and East Anglia. Let's look at Danelaw for a second. Oh, this is the Raven Banner. The Raven Banner. Interesting. You guys recall that, Dune, we were talking about the Raven. Think about also how interesting it is that this bird looks like a Haida Native American totem in the Pacific Northwest. to some extent. Now, this is the Danelaw. As you can see, Cambridge is on the border, and there's major wars in up until the Battle of Hastings. I think is when this sort of disintegrates. So the Danes lost control of that. Alfred the Great took over the throne, spent several years fighting Viking invasions. Reputation as a learned and merciful man of a gracious and level-headed nature who encouraged education, proposed that primary education be conducted in Old English rather than Latin, and improving the legal system and military structure and his people's quality of life. He was given the epithet the Great in the 16th century, which is far later. Someone's going to be annoyed that I called him black, but there was. I'm trying to find where I found the evidence of that. There was some pretty good stuff there. Here's his Moorish, his pyramidal, well, not pyramid, but triangular tower, 880s. Can you find anything on that? Let's come back to that. This is an article I was reading, and I found it through a link of names of characters who were assumed to be partially black and had been whitewashed in European history. I think what it was, let me look at his family line. I could probably find it right there. Background. Egbert, Richard Abels. It's his mother's side or something, right? Was a Moorish princess. I'll have to come back to it. I'm sorry. Look it up though, guys. Look up Alfred the Great. Find the part I'm talking about, because Aethelbald and his son. Oh yeah, and then this is the line of kings that are supposed to be descendant from Moors. Aethelbert of Kent, his son of Eramenric, king of Kent. So the line of Kent. Oh, somebody tell me I'm wrong, because I definitely had a whole article on that, and I don't know where that is. Augustine of Canterbury. Oh, well, you know what? Let's go to this. This I can do. Historia Tartarum. So, from the Yale Library, now you can just digitally touch it. Isn't that great, guys? So, let's see. Does it let you go page by page, or how does this work? It doesn't even want, it wants you to make it so difficult that nobody will want to even deal with it. Boom. Well, can I zoom in there? Oh, there you go. Pretty sweet. So this is a book that is from the Cotton Library. It's from the which is the Vespasian codices that belong to Thomas Knoll. So it's part of the Cotton Codex. This, let me get to the next. This is so hard to move the pages. I really don't want you to read these, and you can't download it. It's like, somebody else, please scrape this. Please scrape this. Oh wait, download as PDF. All right, there you go. Cool. No, yeah, no, okay, good. All right, so save this right now. This is a explanation of the lands of the East. And I think it's in Frisian. Wait, there we go. Let's go back. Sorry, I just saw Tartan somewhere. But you can start to pick up the words or there. I might have gone too fast. I mean, you can't read it. It's going to be in Frisian or bad Latin or something like that. But no, it's Latin. Public ad pre cerdum et civism. I don't know. I'll have to read that harder. But if you get into it deeper, there's pictures too. And explanations of the different kinds of beasts of Tartary and different kinds of hats and people who wore these outfits. Most of the time when we look at stuff about Tartaria, gosh, this is the one without the images. Most of the ones we look at Tartaria are from the 1600s, and albeit this is from the mid 15th century, it's supposed to be a copy of something that's much older. So. And it does look older. I mean, the pictures and the texts are older looking than the 16th century understanding. So the idea is it's supposed to be pre-Marco Polo Tartary, and definitely pre-Jesuit Tartary. Sequinare Tau, or Sequinera Dejuti Sequinera Ta the Brave ruled over the last of the local kingdoms of Theban region, Thebes, of Egypt in the 17th dynasty during the second intermediate period. He probably was the son and successor to Senaktenre Ahmose and Queen Tetcheri. Titisheri. I gotta get better at Egyptian. The dates of his reign are uncertain, but he may have risen to power in the decade ending in 1560 BC or in 1558 BC, based on the probable accession date of his son, Ahmose I. The first ruler of the 18th dynasty, see Egyptian chronology, with his queen Ahotep I, Sekenenre Tau fathered two pharaohs, Kamose, his immediate successor, who was the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty, and Ahmose I, who followed a regency by his mother, following a regency by his mother, who was the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Sequenenre Tau is credited with starting the opening moves in a war of revanchism, the political manifestation of the will to reverse territorial losses incurred by a country. Revanchism, that's an important word, against Hyksos. The Hyksos. There we go. To the Hyksos. Let's jump into the Hyksos in a second. Incursions into Egypt. So the Hyksos, a group that were claimed to be associated with Thoth or Seth, a group that did sacrifices, a group that had a singular god, a religious group involved with slavery, a group that are sometimes connected, like here's Yiksaw. So sometimes it's connected with the Hebrews. There's been arguments. I think there's a thing here somewhere on that. Yeah, there you go. In the Manethonian Josephus tradition, Josephus, and most of the writers, Flavius Josephus, who's important, first century Romano-Jewish historian, associated the Hyksos with the Jews, quoting from Manetho's Egyptiaca, Josephus states that when the Hyksos were expelled from Egypt, they founded Jerusalem, contra Apion 190. That's scroll 190, or page, parcel 90. Parcel 1, section 90. It is unclear if the original to Manetho or Josephus' own edition, if this is original to Manetho or Josephus' original edition, as Manetho did not mention Jews or Hebrews in his preserved accounts of the expulsion. Josephus' account of Manetho connects the expulsion of the Hyksos to another event 200 years later, in which a group of lepers led by the priest Osarseth, a legendary figure of ancient Egypt who's been equated with Moses, sounds important, expelled from Egypt to the abandoned Avaris. There they ally with the Hyksos and rule over Egypt for 13 years before being driven out. Interesting. Allies. So not the same people. During which time they oppress the Egyptians, destroy their temples. And after the expulsion, Osarseth changes his name to Moses. Asman argues that the second account is largely a mixture of the experiences of the later Amarna period with the Hyksos invasion, and Osarseth is likely standing in for Akhenaten. I don't know. I don't think so. The final mention of Osarseth is in which he changes his name to Moses, may be a later interpolation. The second account is sometimes held to not have been written by Manetho at all. Well, I'm curious. Osarseth, a legendary figure of ancient Egypt who was equated with Moses. Man, why are we not hearing more? Is this in the Bible? Does it say his name is Osarseth for a while and he changes it to Moses? I feel like it just goes straight Moses. Let's see this hold up. A renegade Egyptian priest who leads an army of leopards and other unclean people against a pharaoh named Amenophis, or Amenhotep. The pharaoh is driven out of the country by the leper army in alliance with the Hyksos. Man, what the heck? Why am I only hearing about this now? Osarseth. Hold on. Any images of this guy? Oh yeah, Yeah, that doesn't look like no at all, does it? Yeah, I mean, come on. Okay. I'm curious. Somebody do more research for me into Asarsef and Moses, because tell me I'm wrong, you know? Tell me where to go. Cash me outside. Simple stuff. Okay. Dul Nun al-Mizri, often referred to as Dul Nun al-Mizri or Zulnun al-Mizri for short, was in Egypt for short, yeah, was an early Egyptian Muslim mystic and ascetic. His surname al-Mizri means the Egyptian. Oh, okay. Misery. I'm living in misery. He was born in Upper Egypt in 796. Dul Nun is said to have made some studies of the scholastic disciplines of alchemy, medicine, and Greek philosophy in his early life, before coming under the mention of the mystic Sadun of Cairo, who is described in traditional accounts of Dul Nun's life as both his teacher and spiritual director, celebrated for his legendary wisdom both in his own life and by Islamic thinkers. Dul Nun has been venerated in traditional Sunni Islam as one of the greatest saints of the early era of Sufism. Most prominent saints of the early traditions, depicted as a spiritual master of Saul al-Tustari, according to Persian custom. Abu Muhammad Saul ibn Abdallah was a Persian Sunni Muslim scholar and early classical mystic. He founded the Solmaniya school, Muslim theological school, which was named after his disciple Muhammad ibn Salim. A legendary alchemist and thaumaturge, Dul Nun al-Mizri, is supposed to have known the secret of the Egyptian hieroglyphs. His sayings and poems, which are extremely dense and rich in mystical imagery, emphasize knowledge or gnosis, marifa. Let's open up marifa. More than fear, mahafa, or love, mahaba. The other two major paths of spiritual realization in Sufism. Fear and love are literally other paths. None of his written works have survived, but really brutal. So in other words, they were all destroyed. But a vast collection of poems, sayings, and aphorisms attributed to him continue to live on in oral tradition. Osho mentions him as an Egyptian Sufi mystic, one of the greatest who's ever walked the earth. Dude, well, no written records. Are you telling me that they didn't exist? Scholar like that? It's kind of shady. I don't buy it. According to Persian custom, well, we just did Saul, didn't we? I mean, we talked about him for a second. I want some from you. Save it for another time. You can only do this for so much. Marifa is the interior knowledge in Islam, the mystical knowledge of God, the higher realities. Marifa. I can get down with that. The legal path is the Sharia. The methodical, esoteric path. Someone was just telling me about this the other day. There are 4 doors to Islam, at least to Sufism. And you could either memorize the Quran. Let me pull that back so you can... Hi, everybody. You could either memorize the Quran, literally, just in even as a dead language if you didn't speak Arabic. If you memorized it, you could just memorize the sounds. And that would be okay with certain families, that their kids could just memorize it without knowing what it means. Or you could learn what it means and not memorize it, which is I would probably, as an older person, pick that one. But as a kid, right? As a kid, maybe you just pick to memorize. I know kids who've memorized the Quran instead of learning what it means. So that's interesting. But those are 2 doors, and then there's the mystical gnosis path and the truth verity path. So there's the knowledge awareness mysticism and the truth verity mysticism, which is, that's interesting. They divide them into 2. I'm gonna pull up some more of the questions here real quick. Hi everybody. Blessings from Taiwan. Oh, to Taiwan. I was like, man, memory man. Yeah, I wish we were in Taiwan. I mean, careful what you wish for. But yeah, I do love Taiwan, and I hope that this week is safe. It's April, right? I think May is. I'm particularly worried about May. If it happens sooner, I wouldn't be surprised. But the Russia thing, they're gonna wait till it's perfect amphibious assault. I'm pretty sure. Okay, let's see. So on the apocalypse. Wow, there's just so much going on here. Hey X, great to catch your live streams. Thanks, son of Overbook. Good to see you. Brandon Prescott, I respect your state. Oh, that's to someone else. You're not even talking to me. Okay. Busybuddies name plus Prince Hall Wright is watered down in my opinion. I rather join AMA or York Wright. Meh. That was over 10 years ago. Right. Well, I tend to say not to join groups that would accept people like me as a member, or you as a Groucho Marx kind of joke. But also, groups that make you keep secrets, I don't like that idea necessarily. I think it's kind of a bummer. I think you shouldn't proliferate that in the same way you shouldn't proliferate software that's closed source, right? Like we should try to do the right thing. So I know there was a video about me recently. I almost should pull that up because it was pretty funny. And you should watch it because it's hilarious. If you're my fan and you watch my videos and you know who I am, I think it's pretty funny to watch the video that's like, Andreas, he's dangerous because he tells you about symbolism. Like it's not that I'm hiding symbolism. I'm like, hey, look at this. Turn it sideways. What does it mean? Here's the root symbol. Here's the intention of the perhaps devious or maybe kind of interesting mystical guy, right? Because for the most part, I'm not as bad as saying like, oh, they're all evil. Like, what's the point? I mean, but also, what's the point of saying anybody's good or evil? Because it's like, yeah, as life goes on, people make choices and sin, and so by the end of someone's life, if you really count it all up, they're going to look pretty much unlike God, right? And if you look at the beginning, you can say, oh wow, that child looks a lot like God because they haven't done anything wrong yet. That's a big reason why people say that. They think it's adorable and innocent. And instantly, what's the first thing it does is it poops on you. So, can't trust humans, and can't join these organizations and expect to make a difference. Maybe I'm wrong. Do what you got to do. Help your family out, whatever. But I think you can avoid it now. And if you can make these, this is what we're doing here. We're trying to make a group of people that can communicate. We don't need to keep secrets, as far as I know. And that's a big thing for me because a lot of the time they're like, hey, make like a paywall video. And even then, I'm like, like I get that you could just see it, so that's cool. But what's the point? What's the point of doing that? So, all right, I've rambled enough on that front. Let me open it. I need to get that button pushing thing though, because then I could be like, and back to me, and then back to the video, and then back to me, and then back to the, okay. Exodus, movement of Xirtus, Marifa, Gnosticism, and the struggle for the world's soul. At the beginning of the third millennium, three worldviews compete to conquer the minds and hearts of people and cultures. Oh, I love it when you write in present tense. People don't do that enough. The world's soul, materialistic relativism, Gnosticism and Christianity. The new evangelicism demands a clear-cut separation between Gnosticism and Christianity if we want to bring every thirsty person to the water of life. Okay, just so you know, this is clearly a Catholic educational research center publication, and they probably don't like Harry Potter. Let me see. They might. They're not Protestant. What do Harry Potter, the Star Wars series, The Matrix, Masonry, New Age, and the Raelian cult, which claims to have cloned the first baby, all have in common? Dude, come on. Catholics are rad. This is hilarious. They're aware. Their ideological soil. This is so good. I'm sorry. I'm going to calm down. Identical esoteric ideas suffuse the novels, the movies, and lodges, the alternative spirituality, and the cloning atheistic religion. And this ideological soil has a name. Gnosticism. Gnosticism is an eerie word. I don't know about that. Whose meaning eludes our minds. I often meet Catholics who have heard the term but only have a foggy idea of what it means. Perhaps Gnosticism itself is foggy. Couldn't it have been like misty? Something? No, foggy's bad. Yet whether we understand it or not, Gnosticism may be, at the beginning of the third millennium, the most dangerous enemy to our Christian faith. Notice, I'm not saying Star Wars or Harry Potter is the danger. They provide us with the good lessons and fine entertainment. I mean, now I'm arguing. There are just two signs of the power of the real enemy: Gnosticism. Whoa, this guy doesn't like it. Interesting. What's wrong with Gnosticism? Well, what is Gnosticism? In one dense but masterful summary, we find the essential aspects of Gnosticism in his book, Crossing the Threshold of Hope. Pope John Paul II writes, "A separate issue is the return of ancient Gnostic ideas under the guise of so-called New Age. We can't delude ourselves that this will lead towards a renewal of religion. It is only a new way of practicing Gnosticism that attitude of the spirit that in the name of the profound knowledge of God results in distorting his word and replacing it with purely human words. Gnosticism never completely abandons the realm of Christianity. Instead, it has always existed side by side with Christianity, sometimes taking the shape of philosophical movement, but more often assuming the characteristics of a religion or para-religion in distinct, if not declared, conflict with all that is essentially Christian." So this is interesting. I kind of, what do you guys think about that? Do you guys agree? I mean, Gnosticism is pretty awesome to some extent, but it is obsessed with angels and demons and the sophist Christ, the Sophia of Christ. Gnosticism is definitely a different kind of religion, and it has allowed a lot of things to creep back into the mainstream. I mean, I do hear that, like the fears of the New Age movement using Gnosticism or whatever. Is it all about intention? Is the road to hell paved with good intentions? I mean, I like the idea of Gnosticism because it's expansive. It makes Christianity more interesting, and it's not even that it is root of Christianity. I think a big thing with Gnosticism is we look at the beginning of the church, maybe not the third millennium, but the 3rd century or 2nd. And Tertullian, 180 AD, and you're saying, hey, we should believe that the Word is the Word of God. Okay, well, but then they're like, no. This letter from Paul to this city is the Word of God. You don't get what I'm saying. And they're like, I don't know. I don't think that letter by Paul to the city of Thessalonica or to Corinth or anything is the Word of God per se. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't even personally, Andreas here, think that. Sorry. I think the Word of God is not necessarily something written by Paul. And that it's something maybe that we have the Word of God is like the Spirit in us, etc. But be really careful when you start saying that some guy wrote something and that's the Word of God. That's a really dangerous, it sets a really dangerous precedent. It's what led to a lot of wars about Christianity. It simply didn't need to be fought. And at the same time, there was an entire movement that was saying, hey, the Word of God is the vibe of God. And maybe we shouldn't think that Paul should be in charge of the church. Maybe what we should do is shift away from that. I mean, this idea of the Gospels, for instance, I mean, it's 100 years after Christ. Maybe we need to shift into all these other books. There's all of these different alternatives that people were thinking that Christianity was about. That was dangerous. That led to the, maybe I can pull open this. Do I still have this open? I'm going to have to save most of this for later because I really want to make that one into a video. But I'll share you my gem. Jesus Baffy. So Alexmenos Graffito was discovered in Rome. Let me see if this is going to... Let me just pull this up in the correct window. Will that work? There we go. Alexmenos Graffito, and it was discovered in 1857, etched into the plaster wall of a house from ancient Rome. The Alexmenos Graffito is a piece of Roman graffiti. It says Alexmenos worship God. Let me just show you the picture of it. There you go. This is one of the first pictures of Jesus. Here's what it looks like. Here's the original, right? So I'm not just messing with you. It really is. This is what it looks like. But here's what it basically, and I like this meme of it, honestly. Whoever drew this is just like, that's pretty, it's pretty accurate. So basically, you'll notice that Jesus is the donkey guy. And look at this Roman guy's face. Like, come on. Like, that's amazing. That's hilarious. Like, please, guys, make a meme out of this. It's just that good. But you're like, hey, Jesus with the donkey head? That's crazy, right? Well, I mean, Baphomet. Just in case you haven't thought about it, there's this idea, Baphomet, and then has anyone done this? Am I the first one? I mean, I feel like no. Like, there's got to be people that have done this before. Anybody? No? Okay, well, it's evil. Got to be careful. I get all that, but here's the funny thing about that. I know going down that rabbit hole is just going to freak people out, but let's just think about this for a second. Etruscans mirrored backwards Latin. We know this now. We've gotten, and it's not exactly true because the sounds are slightly different, and we kind of can decode what the message is. We're finding out that these Christians were burning other kinds of Christians, Gnostics, at the stake, burning them because they were worshiping in ways they didn't like. For instance, because they did the thing backwards, the Mass and the prayer backwards. Well, now we know that everyone was doing Etruscan backwards. So is the Romanization of the church backwards. The guys burning you at the stake are wearing all black, and they have a cross upside down, and they have all these excuses for it. I get it, St. Christopher, St. Peter, etc. But they also have the idea that St. Christopher had a dog head, and that Jesus had a donkey head. And then there's the Gospel of Nicodemus. Can I get that up? Let me see. Gospel of Nicodemus. 1 second, guys. Boom. Gospel of Nicodemus. Acts of Pilate. An apocryphal gospel claimed to be derived from the original Hebrew work of Nicodemus, which appears to be the Gospel of John. Appears in the Gospel of John with association as an associate of Jesus. The title Gospel of Nicodemus is medieval in origin. Flamenco. The dates of its accredited sections are uncertain, but the work in its existing form is thought to have arisen around the 4th or 5th century AD. Authenticity, well, yeah, you guys are going to go to Wikipedia to believe in their what they say. Anyway, there's a few really important things in this book, including the Heralding of Hell. The Heralding of Hell. So the Heralding of Hell is when Jesus he dies, and he has to pay, he's a shepherd sacrifice, because the deal is a sheep is an atonement ritual. You burn a sheep, and then you get to be forgiven for a certain amount of sin. Well, you burn a shepherd, who happens to be God, and it's an omnipotent, omnipresent sacrifice that will work for everybody all the time. It's like the best possible sacrifice. Good job, Jesus. But he has to go to hell, and once he gets to hell, he has to walk through hell in this awesome painting, by the way. This is one of the best paintings of it. Like, look at these guys. Look at that guy. Crazy. I mean, these are amazing. These weird, evil bird things, which, by the way, monkey, bird, baboon guy probably existed. I mean, these things look like... Have you seen some of the pictures of Australian fauna that has been destroyed in the last 500 years? I mean, these kinds of things probably were around, And he's, like, dealing with these souls of heaven. He's walking through hell, and he finds... I think that's Adam and Eve. That doesn't really look like Adam and Eve to me. It's probably somebody else, because he has to deal with several different people. Is this it? He has to lead out people out of hell, right? Because these souls have been trapped. I mean, this is since issue 23. This is the best comic book about Jesus, and he's got this huge, weird mushroom crown thing going on. The resurrection of the dead grants salvation to the souls by heralding hell. So it's not just Adam and Eve. It's everybody after Adam and Eve. Pretty wild. It's Jesus in the Tartarus. Why did they cut this one out? It's just so good. And so most people used to believe this. I don't think a lot of Christians believe this anymore. That Jesus went to hell, walked through it like Orpheus in the Hellenic myth with Eurydice, and instead of turning around, bravely harrows hell. So I find that interesting. Anyway, they didn't know for sure that Christians didn't worship a donkey. This was made by Romans making fun of Christians. Look at those guys. You know what they worship? They worship this donkey who died because he rode into town as a donkey, not on a donkey. lost in translation. But as you start to look into that, it becomes more and more interesting, the connections between Beowulf. I'm going to do this is going to be a whole episode. If you could read that as fast as that, good for you. But otherwise, I don't want you to know too much. And cut back for some comments. That one's going to be good, though. I promise. You're going to like that video. It's going to be important. And, go ahead and look into it. Like, I want you to know these things. I just also want to make the video as well as possible about those subjects. So I wrote it all down. Brandon Prescott, have you ever looked into the 90s tabletop role-playing game Mage the Ascension? Yes. Fun game. I think we had that at the castle. And if so, does its notion of paradigm have any relationship with what you're doing with your work? Yeah, totally. I think that's kind of the idea of designing the. I was thinking about this the other day. You can imagine what you would be doing in another reality. Like, let's say you're in a multiverse kind of, like that movie Jet Li's The One. I'm not saying you are, but let's say that there is, you're off course from God's perfect, where you're supposed to be what God wants you to be dimension. And there's, in a multiverse, there'd be others too. There'd be like the one where you're happiest. You might not be happiest necessarily serving God, but serving God is probably the better one that lasts the longest and helps the most people, and you might not realize it, but you might be more contented by it. So, better to pick that universe. But you could be sitting around laying there, relaxing, and imagining what you would be doing, sitting around laying and relaxing in the other timeline, where you're rich and famous, or where you're God's gift, or whether you're God's sacrifice, as Jesus. And you start to think, don't just worry about the time that you're sitting there relaxing, or what that version of you would be doing when they're relaxing. Think about what they did throughout the day before they relaxed, or and start to incorporate into your own reality the choices you should make in order to better align yourself with what you think God wants you to do. And I mean, that's a lot of conjecture there. I'll let you just worry about that. I'm not gonna tackle that one. So, because of the inherent imbalance, that's my perception of it. Even with my best intentions and actions, failure is an option, so the only way forward is seeking further truth, says Dizium the Illusion. Of course. Dizium the Illusion. I'm sorry. I know you. I agree with that, too. Based people don't brag about being based. Yeah, but I really strive to get back away from the acidic pH balance. So, on that level. Mark, yeah, buddy, the principles and concepts found in the first words of the divine prophet and divine texts. Yeah. No Disney Plus for me, thanks, says Memory Man. Good for you. Yeah, avoid Netflix. And you guys saw the news. And, I could do news, and I probably will do some news, but it's just you're hearing it all the time. So by tomorrow, it's over anyway. But yeah, they're going to do commercials on Netflix, and it's going to be just as bad as before, but worse. And Twitter and blah, 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 blah. I will say this about Twitter. I think that Elon Musk's about to look really good as a miner, right? And mining for lithium is so invaluable that he's going to become a ground mining company again. Beyond SpaceX and boring, they're going to have to be. So he's going to need the PR around the world. This is the cheapest way to get into the big bucks of becoming. His family have always been South African mining family. So I think that's really the goal here. So I was going to say that. And pop back into the. Let me push it a little ahead there. I'm going to close these guys up. The Kent. Exodus. Secret Knowledge of Gnostics, Star Wars Clash Between the Good Powers. I'll let you guys look at this if you guys are interested. You can find Gnosticism, the Struggle for the World's Soul in the CatholicEducation.org. I tend to like some of the things they say because they clearly have a Jesuit perspective, and if you want to know what the Jesuits are thinking, read what they write. But I also worry about pushing too much of what they're saying. First, okay. Where is Gnosticism in today's culture? You might bump into it in successful films and novels such as Harry Potter, Star Wars, The Matrix, or face it in religious and philosophical movements such as the New Age and the Railing Cult Freemasonry. Now, note the difference between the three media products and the three movements. The movies and books do not instill a credo you must believe in if you are to watch, read, and enjoy them. I'm going to not read much more of this guy because I think he's wrong. I mean, clearly Star Trek has a prime directive, right? Star Trek has a prime directive. If you want to be part of the Gryffindor house, you have to choose not Slytherin. I mean, Jedi, there is no emotion. There's only peace. Come on. Like, every one of these has a credo. So, yeah, sorry, Catholicism, but you're out of touch. You get to work on that. So, save that for another time. The Aeneid is a Latin epic poem by Virgil. He died when he wrote this. It was published after he died. He didn't want it published. I think I'll just give you some of my face on that. He didn't want anyone to know because it was written about his companion. I think it was Augustus. Is that right? Caesar, right? Which one? Which Caesar? Yeah, Augustus. Well, you know. So Caesar and him had gone all over the place, and it'd be like a Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption kind of game where they're like, yeah, we just finished the mission. What are you doing, Augustus? Stop raping and murdering that corpse or donkey or whatever, because Augustus was a little wild. And that made its way into the Aeneid. He was like, hey, this guy is not the best leader. I mean, he's the best leader for now, but he's not a perfect leader. You know, this is this terrible humanism, perfection, that we have, this misnomer, perfection. And it leads to things like eugenics and to murder and to classism and suffering in a lot of ways, because we falsely believe that something that isn't perfect or isn't ideal, because it's ideal in this moment, that it'll be ideal in the future. Dangerous stuff. So the Aeneid shows kind of a Homer's Odyssey, but it's designed for this future king, and to say, hey, be careful, Caesar, be careful, Rome, because you could end up real bad, real fast, with the SPQR just collapsed and everything. And that's my story. So here's a couple pictures of from the Aeneid. Look at that chant. Chat. What? Oh man. Beheadings. It's terrible. Sorry, buddy. There's not a lot I need to say about the Aeneid, actually. I mean, you got to look in the Punic Wars. It's important historically because it will show you about what was going on in this region here that was the known world, quote unquote, because the water here connects all around the world. And to be able to go all over the place from Carthage and into Thracia. And if you look at Thracia, okay, part of the interesting thing here is the idea of the 12 tribes going into Ukraine. 12 tribes, Ukraine. Because you look at, let me see, distance from Israel, Ukraine, distance. Map. There we go. Check this out. Look how not far this really is. Seriously, this is really not that bad. Like, I walked this distance in my lifetime across Spain and France, and if you and then counting walking back, I think I've done pretty much this distance. And as you would imagine, this isn't a bad thing to walk through either. Everyone's like, oh man, how could they possibly blah blah blah. The Egyptian, Syrian, Phoenician coast into the sea, across the sea into Aleppo and Tripoli. Beautiful places, great fishing, lots of food, lots of good people. And you could cross Istanbul and Constantinople, right, through Turkey into Ankara and end up in the Black Sea. Now, you could do this whole thing where I don't think they did this. They could have. There's a river path, though, that you could follow along through Serbia. But there are stories of the 12 tribes coming through Croatia and Serbia, and that would make a lot of sense. But check this out, dude. Just go to Odessa. You go to Odessa and you can go into Kyiv. Just literally like this. So right across the sea on a boat. That's a really quick trip. So anyone who's saying it's impossible for this to have happened is just, I don't get it. It's pretty easy to do this. Boom. That's the whole other thing. I mean, a lot of these places aren't that far. Okay. More interestingly, lasers are driving a revolution in archaeology, which they're blocking you from seeing. Okay. What did past civilizations leave behind? For archaeologists, that question can be difficult to answer. The remnants of buildings and other sites can be almost impossible to spot. Blame the ravages of time and nature, which can cover old walls and foundations and trees, vegetation, water, soil, and more. Then turn to LiDAR, one of archaeology's most exciting modern tools. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, has changed the face of archaeology by making it possible to measure and map objects and structures that might have otherwise remained hidden. Modern LiDAR relies on laser sensors that are deployed from the air or via handheld units. As lasers shine on the area to be mapped, they emit brief pulses of light. The amount of time it takes for those pulses to reflect back to the instrument is measured, and each measurement is plotted using GPS. Computers then use that data to construct a three-dimensional map of that area. Adapting military tech. One of LiDAR's strengths is how well it can pinpoint tiny surface anomalies that indicate small sites like graves or big ones like sunken cities. But LiDAR has its limitations. It can't reach beneath the ground, and trees in densely wooded areas can sometimes cause features to be missed. Guys, just so you know, they're hiding something from you there. Because LiDAR, you could replace with radar, and radar can go through the ground. Ground-penetrating radar uses very similar technology. Instead of laser, you're using radiation, but using radiation, you're able to do a kind of spectroscopy that will allow you to look through trees, look through dirt, and it's dangerous. It can give people radiation cancer, I guess, probably, but it's also instantaneous, so it might be kind of, you can imagine, like an X-ray for 1 million people at once or something. So who's to say? But that technology does exist. At this point, LiDAR is more useful because, I mean, it's more prevalent because they've removed enough of the rainforest now that you can just kind of scan with light and see what's left. Its accuracy is prized by archaeologists who use it in map topography, plan excavations, spot archaeological sites they've never been able to see. Okay, I brought this up. Okay, well, really quickly. Bathymetric LiDAR even revealed a Roman village in Croatia. Let's go to that real quick. Airborne laser bathymetry, detecting, recording submerged archaeological sites from the air. Because Croatia is really deep in the ocean, kind of Adriatic Sea, and they can still use light through refraction because it's just still that clear. Not bad. A new way to look at ancient civilizations. In 2016, a team of researchers uncovered ancient cities in northern Guatemala through the use of jungle-penetrating LiDAR imagery. The project was funded by PACUNAM, Patrimonio Cultural y Natural Maya Guatemala's Mayan Heritage Foundation, courtesy of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So here's where the lines were. Here's what's left of it. And they didn't know. Imagine, these are kind of tall, some of these, and we didn't know where they were. So, good job, nature. Looking in the jungle, finding stuff that we couldn't see before. Mayan civilizations are just popping up everywhere, if you can call them that. Not everything is Mayan. There's a lot of civilizations up in Brazil that are starting to be, in the Amazonia state, that are starting to be shown as well. But so much of Peru's actually got decent state funding for this stuff and cares about their heritage enough, it looks like. I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe they're hiding it, who could say? But they have really shown a lot of their natural geography to have ancient civilizations, and they're making museums out of them. It's pretty cool. My favorite and friend, Jonathan Fowler, Dr. Jonathan Fowler, is in Canada. Let me read the cookies for you guys. Airborne LiDAR and 3D modeling technology have emerged as highly valuable geospatial tools available to archaeologists in their effort to gain insights into key historical sites. Being able to accurately visualize how a fort, battlefield, or settlement appeared at critical times creates a narrative. This is the opening paragraph, if you don't even care. One such historic site, however, is Fort Anne in Nova Scotia, Canada, located amongst the oldest and arguably most intriguing European settlements in North America. In 1605, 2 years before the English established Jamestown in present-day Virginia, French explorers set up a fur trading post in an area they named Acadia. The settlement grew, and about a century later, France began building a Vauban-style or star-shaped fort to protect the settlers. See how this continues, guys? This is great. All right, Vauban style. It never ends. Bastion is now Vauban style because of Sébastien Le Presté de Vauban. Okay. Military engineer. Built Star Fort, supposedly. Had an epic mole. That's like, gotta be fake. That's just too good. Maybe. Maybe it's real. I don't know. Birthmarks. Angel with a reef over the guy? I don't know. Places he's been. Vauban. Okay. Somebody French, tell me how much I'm supposed to love Vauban, but I don't think he built it. Sorry, I don't buy it. Oh, trench warfare. Oh, he invented trench warfare. Oh, I buy that. Anyway, star-shaped fort protects the settlers. The structure today called Fort Anne endured. Oh, let me just. Can I do a Fort Anne LiDAR? I'm sure I can do something there. That ain't bad. Seen some better ones. Oh, look at this, dude. This is crazy. Yes. This is, I mean, come on. That's amazing. And here's your map. Okay, so what we're told is, let's just recap. So, the French found, before Jamestown, this place they called Arcadia, and then Vauban made it into a snowflake star fort that was giant, that was just disappeared, just completely disappeared. This was just gone, right? And we can barely see this on. Let me go. Is this it now? Cool. Can you see it? I mean, yeah, you can see it because you've been trained. But normies, I mean, we could find it. It's by a coast. You can look for a point like that. You can see a castle here in the heart, a big square in the center of the octagon. Okay, we could find it. But normies aren't going to ever know that Canada had this Arcadian fort. So that's interesting that this has been found, and they're claiming that the French built it. They just forgot about it. Well, no, there's more. There's more story there actually. Where'd it go? Here we go. Numerous attacks by Dutch and by British, eventually, and Indians, I'm sure. Yeah, falling to British rule in 1710. Under British rule, the fort later played a pivotal role in the tragic event known as the Acadian deportation, in which many French settlers were forced from the area. Some eventually made their way to Louisiana, where a mispronunciation of the name Acadian led them to be known as Cajuns. And by the way, I just said Louisiana. I should have said Louisiana, because that's what they like. The growing role of geospatial in archaeology. Considering its age, Fort Anne is relatively well preserved, having been designated Canada's first National Historic Site in 1921. It serves as a park today, as both a research and instructional project, and the Anthropology Department of St. Mary's University SMU in Halifax decided to bring the fort and nearby town back to life using state-of-the-art visualization techniques. New, different. Okay, so can I look at this even closer? This looks like it might even be a better drawing. I mean, it's colorized. New, different. Okay, so I mean, you have the idea of where the buildings were, and we saw that structural outlay. I think this was just reclaimed, clearly. But then you have to understand that the French were controlled. So I don't know. I'm going to just read the article and let you guys decide. I'm not here to judge. Locating primary data sets. If you guys are interested in the data sets, they were using airborne LiDAR from drones, and they use a number of different systems. So I mean, they had a number of tools. I'm not making this up. I don't think anybody listening to this would think I would be, but you can actually download this now on Thingiverse and 3D print it, which I will do for you guys soon. There's another fort very close to that fort called Fort Edward. Isn't this interesting? So Fort Edward is not supposed to be Fort Anne, yet it's the same style. I think they pretend that Vauban built this one? Let me look at this. Fort Edward, the French. Anything? I see the French there. Yeah, the outpost, the location of the outpost was chosen to keep an eye on the French Catholics who lived in the area. Okay, so in other words, come on, think about this. Here's a fort. Here's another fort. But these two forts, get me here, are made by two completely different groups of people who hate each other. Right? That's our story. That this fort and this fort, they just made the same fort. No, I'm sorry. I reject it. I reject the lack of truth to this article. Anyway, the story goes that Fort Edward played a critical role in the development of the two cities located more than 2,000 miles apart, Halifax and New Orleans, because this is the major deportation. They forced the French out of the region, and Fort Edward then served as a deportation center along with Fort Anne, owner and principal of the Northeast Archaeological Research. The fort, however, was designed first and foremost for defensive purposes, Fowler explained. Sorry, we're going to have to go deeper than normies will allow. But yeah, I mean, this was definitely militarized. No one's arguing this was militarized. It just wasn't originally a military fort, and it definitely wasn't British or French originally. I mean, they had Britons and French living there because they were a trade empire. Here's it today. See, I love this now because, I don't know, I feel like my friends could find this on Google Maps in a heartbeat, and that's good. That's one of the things I like about my friends. Even the ones that I miss. Parks Canada was interested in Fowler's efforts to bring Fort Edward back to life. Virtually, there was no budget to acquire new LiDAR data, but fortunately, the Canadian federal, provincial, and municipal governments have made archives of publicly funded LiDAR surveys freely available. So the data is out there. I'm bringing that up because you could get your own data. You could start looking for this stuff, and you could literally find out where another star fort is. Hopefully in Deseret. Jabalon comes up all the time. This is just, I mean, non sequitur if I've ever had one, but the Masons' god, you know, they have a rite in Royal Arch Freemasonry where there is the Trinity of Jah, Baal, and On for Helios, Ra, Elohim, whatever. You remember On, we're talking about Helios, the power. OTO, even referred to the Royal Arch of Enoch, the Lodge of Perfection. I mean, you know, I'm hesitant to go too deep into like anything too esoteric or dark or whatever, but it's important to know that this comes up a lot. Interpretations of the night also contribute to the assertion, which emerged in 1987, that there's a link between Freemasonry and the Dajjal, a Muslim equivalent to the Antichrist, the one-eyed prophet. The Dajjal, I think it's the movie camera, that's my opinion. They're referenced by David Misa Pidcock, a British convert, has widely been propagated on the internet following September 11th attacks. The Muslim group Mission Islam states that their website was based on Knight's interpretation. Freemasonry secretly worships a devil god. I mean, there's another one I wanted to remember. Was the Gnostic god? Sabaoth. What's it called? List of Gnostic gods. Sophia. Aeon. Man, I wish I could name them all. Not Gnostic gods. Or aspects of God. Let me see here, guys. Dude, what is it called? It's like Yalboath or something like that, right? Yalboath, something? I just can't remember. Wait. Is that it? Yaldabaoth? Come on. This is it, right? Gnostic? Yeah. We did this. Wait. That was so close. Yaldabaoth. Gnostic God, Yaldabaoth. There we go. Come on. Okay. I'm surprised I'm finding... Oh, there we go. because they spell it. Everybody spells it their own 6 ways of Sunday. I with the J with the this isn't good at all. This is terrible. That's not what I want at all. But you could see like the people looking at the Gnostic aspects of Christianity. Oh wait, the Gnostic female principles. There's just so much here, guys. There's a lot there. Yaldabaoth, I think, is kind of connected to Jabalon. I could be wrong. Please don't be upset. Just look into it. I'm just part of me is just researching here, guys. Yaldabaoth, a political understanding on the accounts of reality of the authorities inspired by the Spirit of the Father, the truth, the great apostle referring to the authorities of the darkness, told us that our contest is not against flesh or blood, rather the authorities of the universe and the spirits of wickedness. I have sent this to you because you inquire about the realities of authority, the hypostasis of the archons, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of archons, Gnosticism. Okay. In the Ophite and Sethian systems, which have many affinities with the last mentioned, the making of the world is ascribed to a company of 7 archons, whose names are given, but the chief is Yaldabaoth, or Yaltabaoth, or Yaltabaoth. Man, spell it in all kinds of funny ways. Yaldabaoth, but that's J, so Yaldabaoth. Anyway, in the Apocryphon of Jean, the Demiurge arrogantly declares that he has made the world by himself. Now, the Archon ruler, who is weak, has 3 names. The first is Yaldabaoth, the second is Soklos, which is fool, and the third is Samael. And he is impious in his arrogance, which is in him. For he said, I am God, and there is no other God besides me, for he is ignorant of the strength, the place of which he had come. Okay, I'm going to just... This is probably going to offend somebody. So I've been thinking about this whole God, perfection, human Erasmus, humanism conundrum, and I mentioned earlier that I think one of the main reasons eugenics exists and is this misnomer of perfection, and I mean it's you can ask somebody using the logic, and you can easily get a progressive liberal to become a eugenicist by saying, hey, we're gonna shave off the cancer gene and it's gonna make a perfect gene, right? And it's not hard to see how they would fall for that line until you start to recognize that the same could be said about conservatives because they hold on to certain values that are not associated with Jesus. Like Jesus wasn't a member of the Baptist Church of the 1940s, the Westboro Baptist, wasn't a Catholic, right? But Gandhi said Christians are not Christ. But we have this idea that we need to live up to this perfection, or we need to build this perfection in the same way that Lucifer is designed by God. And you have this in Tron. I think we did the Tron episode. I kind of talked about this a little bit, that God had an ideal, and in the Gnostic versions at least, God changes from the Old Testament to the New Testament. When the Son of God is born, the angry version of God, the angry archon, dies, essentially, in the Gnostic version of Christianity. At least, I mean, the Gnostic is a really silly thing to say. Like, there's just one, But the idea that God was changed by the product of creation, the Creator was changed by creation, is important. And it's not necessarily what everyone believes, obviously. Most Christians would say God's always been all-knowing because he knows what's going to happen at the end. But that doesn't change the fact that change matters. And maybe that's the dynamic between creation and creator, is that the creation is this calculation that's processing, and God's watching it back and like, oh, I mean, it's an idea of how it could happen. If God changes, then we look at the archons also, this idea that Yaldabaoth grows and becomes the merciful version of God. That there's also this, that's where the Sophia of Christ becomes important, because then the Sophia of Christ is the receptivity, which then makes this is not just Gnosticism. This is why priests are considered the brides of Christ, because they're still following the idea of the Sophia of the Christ. I don't know. Let me pull this up again. The arrogance of the demiurge. The second is the fool. The third, Samael. I am God, and there's no other God besides me, for he is ignorant of his strength, the place from which he had come. He is demiurge and maker of man, but as a ray of light from the above enters the body of man and gives him a soul, Yaldabaoth is filled with envy. He tries to limit man's knowledge by forbidding him the fruit of knowledge. in paradise. At this consummation of all things, the light will return to the pleroma. But Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, with the material world, will be cast into the lower depths. Okay, so you got this kind of lion-faced, serpent. You get some demon devil characteristics to Yaldabaoth. I mean, that's not to say that the monstrous, beings. I mean, clearly those angels were pretty scary. So it doesn't mean that righteousness can be terrifying. It doesn't mean only evil is terrifying. But the thing here is that God grows. It's not that God dies. It's like Nietzsche saying God is dead, because the word is dead, not God themselves, but the word that we use is no longer relevant, and we need to, because it's a bad lowercase deity word from Sumer that we're misappropriating and using to refer to the entirety of creation and creator in this henotheistic, as we said earlier, non-monotheistic world, non-pantheistic either. So in that kind of sense, Lucifer or Yaldabaoth as an aspect of God makes sense, because it's this, I don't know if it makes sense, but what makes sense? But this idea that God has made Lucifer and it was wrong, it was right at the time, but God grows and realizes that, made in my own image isn't, to make the perfect system that I said was perfect yesterday, isn't perfect anymore. And so God has to change. And so does the world around God. So there are resets. in Gnosticism, there's resets. And in Havelokian Hellenistic uplift, there's this idea that the Hellenistic thought is an uplift that causes us to make better choices, that we're able to make more, to think thoughts that we weren't able to think before. Kind of like Shakespeare is maybe breaking us down and taking away from thoughts we could have. Although it's hard to say that, because Shakespeare is kind of useful in certain ways. It's important, because it does give us ways to communicate. It is important to recognize that so much of Shakespeare is imprinting and changing what you believe about words. If you didn't have a word for lie, if you didn't have such specific versions of words for liars, so Shakespeare's changed everything about the way we perceive the world and the communication we use. Lucifer has done the same. So God has, over the generations of humanity, if God is listening, then God has had to grow. I think that's a tenet of Gnosticism. At least it should be. And if that's the case, then it makes the most sense that the outdated ideas have to change, because it's not just that we're changing, it's that the whole world's changing with us. I don't know. There's my thought. So, Gnostics then, under the name Nebro, the rebel, Yaldabaoth is called an angel in the apocryphal Gospel of Judas. He is first mentioned in the cosmos, chaos, and the underworld as one of the 12 angels to come into being, rule over chaos and He comes from heaven, his face flashes with fire, and whose appearance was defiled with blood. Nebro creates 6 angels in the addition to the angel Saklas to be his assistant. Those 6 in turn create another 12 angels, with each creating a portion of heaven. It's a 77 virgin thing. Yaldabaoth, the Gnostic female principles in its fallenness. The Gnostic myth is an elaborate literary work in which Yaldabaoth appears as a puzzling and repulsive character. The myth depicts a world beyond human experience, yet its essence is the experience of human suffering in the world and the message of salvation and liberation from the world. The myth reflects the tensions and pains in life of the myth makers, which they project on a plane beyond the ordinary. Thus, I suggest that Yaldabaoth appears as a symbol for an aspect ordinary life experience. A life experience that is drastically different from that which the writers of Genesis stories seem to be the reason why the Genesis creator God became an ignorant, arrogant creator angel. The Gnostic myth depicts this demiurge as a monster with a number of feminine traits. To paraphrase Richard Smith, the Gnostic, I don't think they meant what that sounds like, but maybe they did. The Gnostic writers turned the patriarchal god of the old into an effeminate fool. See, I get the exact opposite, actually. So my interpretation is that the castration of, or the neutering of the Trimurti, of the Trinity, is the removal of the femininity, right? Because the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, shouldn't it be like mom and dad and son, or mom, dad, and child, or something? So you had, and that was apparently a version of it. And you look at the Druids and the the Zoroastrians and the ancient Arata or Urartu. I should get into that. I'm gonna pull up a tab for later because it's gonna matter. Urartu. Did I get that right this time? All right, guys. I'm just save that for later because it's gonna matter. Where are we at? Urartu, Demiurge. I don't know. Somebody remind me. Look at the comments for a second. Physical Night. Watch the Pick Miner, especially. Message deleted by mods. Good job, guys. Have you ever looked into the 90s tabletop role-playing? No, we already did that one. Go further. Horseman. Feminine out of the Trinity. Thank you. Feminine out of the Trinity. I was like, someone will remind me. I don't even have to skip the subject. So, removal of the feminine from the Trinity has made it impotent, and to return to the feminine aspect, and you look at Theosophical God and the Urartu and the Arata civilization, the feminine aspect of God, Anani, Anuit, Isis, Ishtar, Astarte. You know, there's a lot there of these. The idea of the goddess is essential, and the sons are born in the goddess. The womb allows for the sons, so the femininity is really important. And the Mother Earth, you know, for instance, Cronus, Father Time, Mother Earth. It's not enough to have the masculine or the feminine in order to have the alchemical transformation. So, what was the reason about that? Oh yeah, because they were saying that they thought that God had been made into this effeminate fool, when really what it looks like is because they tried to turn all the gods into one god, they said, oh, that was really not the mother, that was the father. And then it breaks the narrative in every line. And you're like, well, then apparently God is really, God's like a lot of things. Okay, so just deal with it. You know, I mean, like this idea that God is also, I mean, it's true that God, in the sense of creator, is everything and omnipotent, and then also capable of being in one place. Because if they're so powerful, how can they not be everywhere? How could they limit their power? I mean, they have to be able to, right? Because there's no limit to their power, unless you're saying they can't limit their powers. In which case, you're saying that their powers are limited by their inability to limit their power. I mean, these are the rules of Superman. You know, you have to understand. Like, this is a comic book. These rules set out the precedent for the rest of the series. So, the feminine aspects of God, they started to say, oh, well, no, these are really actually good things, and that's the Mother Mary, and, you know, if we start to, the Sophia of Christ, I mean, so the wisdom then becomes feminine, and that's wrong too, because if you haven't paid attention today to Johnny Depp's trial, not any human is innocent, or is any gender better necessarily than the other. It seems like it's important to recognize the faults and the credits, give credence to all aspects of the personification of a being. You know, this is why we look for the sins of David, right? Killing his friend, etc. We have to be aware that there are sins. So the feminine aspect isn't necessarily the reason why God looks like a fool in some of these books. It's literally more because that's one of the characters. Seth plays, Loki, and Loki's a Hellenistic character. I forget if Loki's based on Nike or Mercury. Someone get back to me on that also, because there's a huge thing, and I'll have to do another episode another time because I don't want to look it up right now, but the thing on Norse mythology's Hellenistic origins, because it was clearly manipulated on purpose. Melissa says, I'd punch Johnny in the face and lie about it too if I had a conversation with him. My God. Well, you know what? Stay out of LA, because that, I mean, literally the only reason I could give a care at all, and I shouldn't, and we should move on, you know, to like Demiurge is about the Gnostic, anything other than what's going on in the world of the Orwellian real world of Babylon. Because it's boring and it won't matter tomorrow. Whereas, ironically, this still matters and it will always matter whether you care or not. So, let's see. Sabaoth. We did this already. Hypostasis of the archons. The hypostasis of the archon, the reality of the rulers, is an exegesis of the book of Genesis 1 through 6 and expresses Gnostic mythology of the divine creator. You could look into this, and you could look into the stories of Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, and all the crazy stuff. I mean, this is the Gnostic stuff's fun. Do it. One thing I would bother to mention, I think Leo put this out, is that the Nag Hammadi library was discovered in 1945. So the idea that this is all ancient stuff is questionable. I mean, everything is from the last 150 years. Even the Beowulf translation came from J.R.R. Tolkien. So, who's to say? It could all be lies. J.R.R. Tolkien did say that evil can't create, it can only manipulate. That could be a lie made by evil, and maybe evil is really creative. I think evil was created because I think Lucifer writes show tunes. I'm pretty convinced that all of worship music started with Lucifer. Lucifer was expelled, and that's why music's always love songs. But up until a point, and now it's all like, I'm going to get along without you, and I got to break up with you. It's like, we get it, Lucifer. Just leave God and just stop making songs about it. But that's all they can do. Like, this, now that they're free, they just do what they were designed to do, which is like worship every day. That's my opinion. Anyway, evil could probably lie. If it can't, then J.R.R. Tolkien's right, and it's a beautiful idea, because if evil can only manipulate creations of other things that goodness creates, then how much really is Nag Hammadi made up? How much of the manipulation is a removal of some point, not an addition of a point? Or maybe the point doesn't matter because they changed the wrong aspect. Let's hope for the best. I'd like to believe that these ancient things did make it through culture, and Gnosticism did exist besides Nag Hammadi. So it's just that there were so many books that were lost. But then we do look and see, again, with Shakespeare, Ed de Vere, Thomas Noel Codex, and in the Thomas Noel Codex you'll find, let me find Solomon and Saturn. That's a pretty weird book. Hold on. I think this is it. Yeah. Well, Saturn, Pentacles, dangerous magic stuff, right? In the Bible, very easily could have been included this book. It's written in Frisian, Old English. It presents a dialogue of riddles between Solomon, the king of Israel, and Saturn. And not the planet, but literally the god who consumed the baby Jupiter. So I think that's kind of interesting. That kind of blows my mind. I mean, that's a pretty good book. So it's identified in 2 of the poems as the Prince of the Chaldeans. But really, let's be real. I mean, the Prince of the Chaldeans, for reference, that the Chaldeans were the magicians in the Hebrew Semitic culture a lot of the time. And, by the way, there are modern Chaldeans, and they're awesome. And they have pretty girls and great music and cool food. But at one point, everybody gets their culture manipulated and used as a camouflage by some evil group for one period or another. So don't hate on the modern Chaldeans, but also know that Chaldea in ancient Mesopotamia was the south. And so, that was the south of the empire. It could have been the Confederate that was what it was. And ancient Chaldeans were not native, but arrived later from Western Semitic Levantine migration. So there you have it. There's that. The connection to Seth again. Anyway, you could say that this was the prince, but really, that's interesting in and of itself. If Roman traditions about this god are that he was a royal god and his family are royals, then how far off is it that the Prince of the Chaldeans would have been this prince? All right, so I'm going to open it up again and look at a couple things. The so-called prose, Solomon and Saturn in the Noel Codex again, and I'll just get that link for you guys because you guys should probably look into the Noel Codex. I did a couple of videos. If you type in, I think it was the Deep Share podcast I did I did a bunch of podcasts recently where we brought up the Noel Codex. So this is an important book. It's the Thomas Knoll was the tutor of Ed de Vere, who was the Shakespearean author, or at least the prose creator at one point. And in the Knoll Codex, you have that Wonders of the East, or the Wonders of Tartary, and the two-headed man. Here's some of those pictures. So earlier I was like, hey, where are these pictures in the Yale book? But you'll see crazy stuff here. Two-headed man with the horn, and these camels being killed by jackals and rhinos. And these are, again, if I showed you this book in 100 years and there was no pictures left of rhinos, you'd be like, that wasn't real. There's no rhinos, or something like that. So it is interesting that exists. Let me see. Let me go back to that again. I love just spiraling off into like nothing. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But that's kind of the fun of doing a live stream for me. I mean, basically, I did this because I had so many tabs open that I had to deal with. So you've seen these kinds of pictures in newer form, right? I think we've all seen the Tartarus head, the face man thing. I mean, this is much older, and so maybe it's completely fake. Yet it was discovered later in the 1700s or something because it was burned. The Cotton Library was burned. Thomas Knoll's Codex ended up there, but I mean, I kind of buy this one. I kind of buy that this is real. I kind of buy that this codex isn't made in the 1800s and might have been made in the 1400s or might have been made in the 12th century. I kind of buy that. And most of these ones, it makes sense because that would be the period when there were people that were having their libraries burned in Danelaw, Saxony, or in Frisia, so it could all be that it was made up later. And I'm mainly saying this to my most skeptical followers because the reason I'm saying that is even though everyone believes that this is really, really, really old, I think there's maybe a sweet spot. It's probably not 8th century. Could be 12th. I think that's okay. All right? 8th century, a little early. That's what they're kind of claiming. Hard to believe. The idea that it was copied from an older document in the 8th century, kind of viable because that's the point when it was before the Pax Mongola, before the isolation of Tartary, before Marco Polo by centuries. So I kind of buy it. But then you have a new period where they're bringing all this research back up and they're copying that research. That's where the manipulation happens. That's when they're like, oh, well, Tartary is really 4 places. In actually Manchuria and Han and blah, blah, blah. Because the Jesuits are starting to put their own people in charge of these little kingdom regions and destroying the trade network with the land power and then connecting the sea power. So that's my pitch. Anyway, they did these fish with legs and horns and crazy stuff, man. Just crazy stuff. I would recommend looking into the Wonders of the East aspect. Then I would say the Judith poem. I don't even care for the Judith poem, but that's connected to the Beowulf poem. But the Judith poem will, if you listen to it read, is amazing. And by the way, let me get this for you guys. Beowulf read. Oh, best. How about best? If I type best, will it come up? Where is that guy? This guy, dude. This guy's amazing. Can I get away with? How do I do the music? Is the music gonna play? All right. You know what? Quick. No. Audio Hijack Pro to get my sound out. Is that gonna play? I can't even do it. You know what? You can just hear it like this really terribly for a second. It's pretty brutal. So basically, if you wanted to know what Beowulf was really like and how people used to speak in English before Shakespeare, this is the guy, Beowulf epic, the epic in performance, Benjamin Bagby. This guy's rad. You gotta see his rendition of Beowulf. And it's literally just from the Knoll Codex. That's where they get it from. If you want to look into the Knoll Codex, like I said, I went down a huge rabbit hole on the Knoll Codex and on Thomas Knoll himself. I think it's real. I think it's real because I think it influenced De Vere and I think it influenced Shakespeare. But the Solomon and Saturn poems there's like it's like a sphinx is arguing with the king, the wise king with the prince of these elite magical royals. It's an Orientalist fantasy, which works to suppress anxieties about English cultural identity. She argues that the attempt to minimize anxieties about these unstable conditions of knowledge, the future of the kingdom, and about the Christian faith by displacing any lack of knowledge, political stability, or faith onto the Eastern or pagan figures of Saturn and the Chaldean people he represents. Instead, Powell suggests that dialogues original readers would have been encouraged to identify with the figures of Solomon, who is constructed as a model of Christian ideal and behavior. So, but there's riddles basically in this one. Yeah, the prose version has one of its riddles. Who invented letters? Mercurius the Giant? I mean, there's a bunch of really interesting. I haven't completely taken this apart yet. I like to just tell you later, oh, this is what this is about. But no. I'll do that someday, but I'm going to need your help. Saturn's first riddle describes a dragon slayer named Wolf and the wasteland that arises after his death. The poem's earlier editor, Robert Menner, argues that the Velende Wolf passage ultimately stems from an ancient Hebrew legend regarding Nimrod and the building of the Tower of Babel. He interprets Wolf as the Babylonian god Bel, who is connected to Saturn in Isidore's etymologies. Andy Orchard has found similarities between Wolf and Beowulf, and Daniel Anzelzark has found a passage to participate in the Avernian tradition. And the Avernian tradition is, of course, the ancient name for a volcanic crater near Cuma, Italy. Right? So get this. Huge civilization wiped out by a volcano. I'll just leave it with that. Temple of Apollo, covered in lava. Describes impassable wastelands of ancient history. Tristan Major has suggested the passage is an Orientalist confrontation of the biblical and classical material, and that Wolf is to be identified with the mythological Perseus from Greek Perseus, not Percival. For some reason, I was going to connect that, but I won't. The riddle describes in Vasa Mortis. The riddle describes a mysterious bird that will be bound until doomsday. Okay, like the Yazidi peacock. You guys know the Yazidi peacock? Yeah, something like that. Melek Taus. Melek Taus is that Yazidi peacock. So first off, the Yazidi are considered to be an interesting group. I love the Yazidi. They're blonde, blue-eyed people that have been treated very poorly in Armenia and in Afghan, under Al Qaeda and under ISIS, etc. And it's not so much really about their race or ethnicity, but about their religion, because they have this interesting religion about a peacock who is Shaitan. God cries this tear, and the world is in the tear of the egg of the peacock. And I could be getting that kind of wrong, but interestingly, the Sumerian symbol of the dinger here is, this symbol is used to represent deities, or God, or lowercase god. So something to look for is that little symbol, that asterisk looking thing. Borrowed from the Arabic term meaning king or angel. So it could be a different understanding of the name that's changed. But he says in the Kitaba Kilwi, Book of Illumination, also known as the Book of Revelation, who claims to be the word of Taus Melech himself, and we get that from a lot of holy books apparently, states that he allegates responsibilities, blessings, and misfortunes as he sees fit, and that it is not for the race of Adam to question him. Sikh Abdi Ibn Musafri believed the spirit of Taus Malek is the same as his own, and that he was an avatar of the archangel. He said, and he's believed to have said, I was present when Adam was living in paradise, and also when Nemrud threw Abraham into fire. I was present when God said to me, you are the ruler and the Lord on earth. God, and the compassionate, gave me 7 earths and thrones of the heaven. So I brought that up because the peacock god. Let's get back to the doomsday thing. Okay. So the riddle describes a mysterious bird that will be bound until doomsday. It has been bound by Solomon, right? Because Solomon binds all the titans and angels, and when he builds the temple, rebuilds the temple. and is feared by the leaders of the Philistines. The final line of the passage names the bird as Vasa Mortis. Robert Menner has argued that ancient Jewish origins on Solomon's struggle with demons are at the heart of the Old English riddle. He identifies the Vasa Mortis with the demon Asmodeus. Ooh, dark. Close your eyes, kids. Khulufu sees parallels between the Vasa Mortis and the description of Fame in Virgil's Aeneid. Yep. As well as the nocturnal monster in the Anglo-Saxon Liber Monstrum. And the griffin in Wonders of the East. There you go. So, ties your Tartary right in there. So, Asmodeus, Prince of Demons. You guys don't really need this kind of gunk in your lives, but look at him wearing a green robe. So it's not just so you know, green it can mean a lot of things. And maybe it's more important to know how it comes up so commonly. Look at this. It's like in all of these shows on TV. I'm sure there's like a Disney kids game where Mickey Mouse has to help Asmodeus learn how to restring a guitar and swim in a pool of noodles. You never know the way the world is these days, what would exist. So Solomon stuff. Be careful out there, kids. Anyway, Arata civilization. Let's do that real quick. Boom. Okay. In the land that appears in Sumerian mythology surrounding Enmerkar and Lugalbanda, Arata, two early and possible mythical kings of Uruk, mentioned Arata in the Sumerian list of kings. It is a fabulously role in Sumerian literature. It is a fabulously wealthy place filled with gold, silver, lapis lazuli, and other precious materials, as well as the artisans to craft them. It is remote and difficult to reach. It is home to the goddess Inanna, who transfers her allegiance from Arata to Uruk. We'll save that for a second, because Uruk is important. It is conquered by Enmenkar, Enmerkar of Uruk. And that guy was kind of didn't seem like the greatest guy. Sorry. I'm pretty sure he came up on a bad situation, It's one of those, they walked around the city 7 times and noticed there was no running water or power anymore because there had just been an earthquake. So they went in, kind of stories. Anyway, Arata, let me type this in, Ukraine. Because we did that thing earlier, right? I showed you that picture of walking from Ukraine to Israel, or rather walking from Egypt to Kiev, through, you gotta go through Odessa, you gotta go through the Black Sea, but that's even easier. So Arata civilization of Ukraine dating to 22,000 BCE, which is like, okay guys, calm down. But megalithic discoveries in Ukraine into the Trypillian civilization in the Ukrainian area, with Neolithic Vedic serpent graves in the Serpent's Wall, the megalithic temple sanctuary of Stone Grave, and the granite sanctuary observatory of the Steppe Pyramid. This video is like an hour, but there's a pretty good version of it online. I would find it. Tim and Heather Lee Hooker, megalithic discoveries in Ukraine, Megalithomania 2009. And you'll notice I just typed in Arata civilization, I think it was. Yeah, Arata civilization Ukraine, and it'll get you where you gotta go. But you'll find everything you know about stone mounds, about the Veda, about Sumeria, about Frisia, the Danish. I'm serious. Like it's all been. Oh, is that our guy? Consul Magdalene? I can't even tell. There's Jesuits. There's a lot going on here. So gender roles. Huge amounts of data that you're gonna find out about the Arata civilization and its connections to the Thracians and the Tartars. That's right, the Tartars, because there's something that started. Tartaria is what we refer to that ended. So what started? Arata started. Tartaria ended. Reset began. Okay. Let's go a little bit further now. So let's do this again. Arata. What were some of the things we learned about it? Well, the goddess Inanna, right? So who's the goddess Inanna? She's this queen bee right here, right? Look at that, amazing. She's got so many staffs in every direction. The sun's just like, dang, with its ring around the Saturn. Like, the lion, she's not just like hanging on, she's stepping on the lion. So, and then, her face, I'll just make it clear, she's clearly got a large nose. Like, I don't think she's necessarily I mean, well, she also got horns and could be partially animalistic, but she could very easily be not white. Is the point? I think people need to get used to that in history. Anyway, the Uruks, this is the steppe areas where they came from. They ended up looking at this place and being like, "What happened? Dang, there's an earthquake. Let's get in there." And they took it over, and they're like, "Well, what happened?" Well, apparently, that goddess Inanna is, get this, she's not helping. So much work to get this going. I'm gonna do this. So apparently, this goddess Inanna, she's no longer helping the Arata civilization, which is evidenced by the fact that her entire civilization has been wiped out, and everyone's been, all the men have been murdered, and this is where all the Y chromosomes end on this lineage line, and you see a beginning of all of the daughters being assimilated into the Uruk. Interesting. So apparently, that would make you assume that their goddess isn't really helping them out anymore, and because this other dude shows up and takes over, it would seem that the goddess is helping him and his people, right? So that's kind of historicity right there. Boom. Okay, that work? No, it didn't work. Yeah, that worked. Okay, so looking back here, their artwork, it's all right. You got food on tables, donkeys pulling food. Big old look at those thighs. Dang, those are huge, man. It's thick. All right, so this is the Uruk civilization. Not so much what Arata was like, because apparently Arata was way advanced. Location hypothesis. Some people think it moved. Imagine a civilization that was destroyed and moved, right? I mean, like a nation of people that picked up sticks and went somewhere else. Urartu. Now, okay, another thing is, can I find this article? It's always so hard to find Tartar Wiki. Can I do this? I can't. Hate doing this. Translate because I don't have my keyboard set to Cyrillic right now. If I'm on my phone, it'd be really easy, but gotta do this. Okay. Boom. 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 No, that's wrong. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. No. This is ridiculous. I know you can do this. Oh well. It's almost not even worth it. I guess the point is, if you look into, I could find the proof that the Persians had stopped pronouncing the R's and used the R's as apostrophes. So Urartu would have been Uatu, I guess, or something to that effect, or Uata, or Arata. As we start to break things down, Tartar and Tatar and Tata, right? The lacking of the R is used as a differentiation. The Tartar versus Tatar argument in the 19th century became whether it was more Orientalist or more Turkish. If it was Persian as a Turanian empire, then you would wonder if it was more Russian or more Chinese. Makes little sense. If the answer is it was in Persia, it was a Persian empire. It's Persian empire. But it's Turanian, so there are Russians, there are Chinese, there are Germans, there are Moors, there's everybody. But it comes into what part is the culture being pronounced from, and you're saying, well, the Chinese are the Tartars, and the Russians are the Tatars, because they're in the west of Persia. So that's how that happened. Whether or not that means anything at this point is regardless, because it's clearly neither one. It's a Sino-Hamitic civilization. Okay, so Urartu could have been Arata, and it played a huge role in Armenian nationalism because the Armenians thought that Turkish nationalism was off, Armenian nationalism was on. Everything comes from Armenia. There's a lot there to that, by the way. If you start looking into ancient Armenia, it's just crazy. I mean, ancient Phoenicia is Armenia, right? And Armanata into Nimrud, into Babylon. It's probably the first thing after Babylon is Armenia. Fight me on that. I'm very curious. But here you see, here's the Black Sea again, right? So what's above that Black Sea, guys, is Kiev. So it's not that difficult for this to have happened. They would have been going through Armenia and through these regions, of course. So Armenia becomes the fundamental state. And when you start looking at Armenian history, the beehives, the crowns, the gold, these giant, freaking giant monoliths. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, really. I mean, I have a lot of Armenian friends. You guys built this? What? This is crazy. This is insane. Good job, Armenia. Give Armenia some round of applause for Armenia. Anyway, Urartu Cauldron. This is where children were boiled, I guess. I hope not. That sounds terrible. But there were definitely religions like that. Bronze figurine of winged goddess Teshpuea suspension hook. Wow. That's cool. So in other words, you had this like a bird hanging in your house. Crazy. I mean, yeah. Don't have idols, everybody, but still, these are neat. Sun wheel on the head of Haldi. Haldi was one of 3 chief deities of Urartu, was a warrior god to whom the king of Urartu would pray for victories in battles. Wonder how that worked out for him. Oh, and here's your cuneiform, hard to read. Symbols, math, golden ratio, amazing stuff. They've all planned. So clearly they were a pine cone. Okay, that's not weird. Yeah. Wow. Really? No, not even talk about it? Okay. He's just hanging out on a line. I like how he's walking on this line that looks kind of mechanical, as if to say it moves like a lion, but get this, it's more like a car. I don't know. That's a lot to guess. Yaldabaoth, Gnostic god Yaldabaoth, Demiurge, Nag Hammadi, Archon, Sophia. This is good. This is good, guys. We've done a lot. We've done a lot here. We'll get into some Spanish stuff real quick, but I want to really quickly check the comments again. I'm amazed, by the way, that you guys are watching all of this. It's just good for you, good for us all, and I appreciate it. I hope you guys have you guys gone to Tartary Nova or Xirtus.com recently and checked it out. It's a little different. Added some new buttons, new features. There's a donation button. Check that out. Go to the top of TartaryNova.com and click on the Odyssey link. Subscribe on Odyssey, because some of these videos, they don't want you to talk about them. So we're putting them on Odyssey where they're safer. We're going to start doing some live streams on Odyssey soon. I'm going to get Adam Krigler, Alex Stein, a bunch of people. Alex Stein's going to be on it. But we're going to be doing more stuff that you can't say on the regular internet. I have less of a problem with this, because the things I'm saying, for the most part, censors are just like, what? But I do have a big problem, because in general, censors are just like, just preemptively censor that guy. We don't know what he's going to say, but like in like 5 months, we're going to be like, whoa, why did he? Oh, so expect that more of my content will be censored here. And so try to check it out on Tartary Nova. I do want to read some of these comments though. Eugenie, awesome build. Thanks, bro. Ottoman. Why is Cleopatra's Needle in Central Park, New York? Oh, well, that's why. Wait, Casey Paul, I wanna go a little deeper on that. That's an interesting Cleopatra's Needle. So, guys, if you're not from New York, Cleopatra's Needle, one of the 3 similarly named Egyptian obelisks that was erected in Central Park. You guys notice this? Yeah. Look at this. Isn't that wild? This is just New Yorkers. And then here, Cleopatra's Needle. What the heck? Just right in the middle of New York City. Yeah. I don't think that's really nearly as shocking as it should be. I feel like that should bother more people. Weighs 200 tons. Stands 6 to 9 feet. Inscribed with Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was originally erected in the Egyptian city of Heliopolis. Yeah, there we go. So the city of On. It's on now, guys. Boom. As it stood in Alexandria. Leaning slightly to the Pisa, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, so jumping back for a second. And again, I'm going to get to the Spanish stuff, because there's some more of that too, Spanish California. Someone asked me something about, thanks for reminding me. Someone asked me about California. They're like, how did California become not an island? Reasonable question, right? So I wanted to show the Aral Sea. So I'm going to save that for a second. And I'll get into feedback, ecological feedback loops. Worldwide change, Aral Sea. Okay, chat, but comments. Jesus to my ancestors. Be this way, so we are all more alike. We can't have y'all basing your communities on off piracy. I don't know. I mean, funny, but I don't. I think Jesus gets a bad rap a lot of the time because, you know, they want him to be this. Granted, Yeshua is very different than Jesus, so maybe that's a good joke. I don't know. But Yeshua was probably a little bit more countercultural in a certain way. He came with a sword and all that. Seemed to frustrate people. So I could be wrong, but I don't think Jesus was quite what we say when we say, oh, he was just all about wearing a Baptist suit. And, you know, it's saying the end of days are coming, but it's not so much the end of days for us. It was the end of days for the system, right? It was a reset coming. It's pretty interesting. There's a character that's saying, this is all collapsing right now. It's, you know, and he's seeing people. It's like in Red Dead Redemption. I'm going to use that video game twice in this video as an example, because you start out in the Old West, and as you move closer to the Saint Denis city, you realize, yeah, there are people that live in complete nothing in Amish environment, you know, in wild frontier, but simultaneously there are people that have train apartments on their train, and they have instantaneous communication. So all along, you know, Jesus similarly is dealing with people that are saying they're Chaldean mystics and they're able to communicate with stars and everything. And he's saying this is all collapsing at that moment. There are many sources that attest to Jesus from the first century. Thank you, Brandon. The thing about Yeshua in the first century is that most of the sources are talking about still 30 years after he's dead. There are some things to talk about. I mean, you know, Pilate's works of crucifixion. There was a huge group of people that were being crucified at that time. A number of people were. So it's not even that random or rare. Some people have done the Forrest Gump thing. They're like, this guy and that guy were, you know, Brian of Christ was put together by all these different pieces. In a sense, of course that's true. I mean, of course it's true that we have added to the stories. I mean, the Dark Ages are proof of that. And every step along the way, we changed, you know, the story of Yeshua into the story of Christ and Maitreya. But at the end of the day, I'll get an argument still with people that say, oh, well, you know, Jesus didn't exist. It's like, well, yeah, okay. But Yeshua did, to an extent. That's, you know, I'm not, if Yale does their own historicity videos on Yeshua and Jesus, and even they can't completely disregard him. Probably there's something to the existence of a character that really impacted history and was manipulated, boycotted, and exploited by the powers that be afterwards. Kind of a bummer. But, you know, not here to tell you what to believe, just telling you about the beliefs of people. Natives of North America. Oh, I just skipped ahead there. Built in the 1890s. That shirt is hypnotic. Thank you. I love my shirt. It's got 2 pockets. It's great. Osiris is Saturn. Thank you, Lucas. Lucas brought that up because I think I said something about Horus. I meant Osiris is represented by Saturn, which is a great point. Let me read the rest of your comment. Horus is the sun that represents rebirth, resurrection, life. Isis is the mother, God's throne of the sun. It's all metaphysically turned into a religion. Lucas, perfect. Thank you. Yes, Jupiter of Saturn. Yeah, that was exactly what I was looking for, is Osiris. You would be preaching to the choir, someone says to you, Lucas. Well, that's what we do here. We're a choir and we sing. The end is always near. Meet it and begin again, says Aunt Queenie. That's very good. Truth bites. Jesus is I am. Well, actually, I thought that was Yimcha, right, or something, right? Is that the idea of God was I am or something? But maybe I mean, because people are saying Jesus is God. This gets into that whole Gnostic thing. I think that the idea of Jesus just being like unaware of their humanity, just I am God. That misses the point of Yeshua. It's more that idea of manifestation of God's agenda. You're like, and this is it. We finally, and this all happened, and it led to Jesus, and then Jesus does this, and there's this conversation, and this conversation's heard by everybody. by God, by man, by monkeys and trees and stones and donkeys, and then it's misinterpreted, misinterpreted. Oh God, misinterpreted until eventually we look at this whole question of, is there even a Jesus anymore? And then that's incredible. Okay, there's another thing I saw recently, and this might annoy people, but the non-verbal Judaism, is that right? Let me see if I can find. I don't think I can find it. Alternatives to rabbinical Judaism. So someone was saying this, that there is, man, I don't think I can find it. I'll have to look for this. So the idea that rabbinical scholars define Judaism is very common today. And it's been that way for a long time because they're looking at these texts and they're saying, well, these are the wise men, kind of like a mullah will do for the Tartarian Islam. So clearly there's that tradition that's defined. But theoretically, there's supposed to be no need for rabbinical scholar study after the Ten Commandments are given to man, right? Given to Moses. We're supposed to follow the law, at least Noah's law, and then follow Moses' law to an extent. That gets completely removed by this idea. And as time goes on, we start to see Jesus represents this proof that Judaism doesn't need rabbinical assessment, and the Talmudic studies and all these things are supplanted later. They have them in Exodus. Babylonian Talmud is because they're in Babylon. And so much of the anti-Talmudic studies, they're like, oh man, the Talmud says you got to do this horrible stuff. Well, like, you got to remember, it's not really saying that. It's saying in ancient Babylon, there was a rich guy who was in a court proceeding by his religious studies. And they said, okay, well, this isn't illegal, but it's wrong, isn't it? It's morally wrong. What should we do about that? Isn't it morally wrong? And then they have to go through and prove to themselves. And they have these examples which are really echoing the justifications of bad people at certain times. So it shows you that it's a really huge discussion, a huge tent, and there's a bunch of people having different interpretations, and a bunch of people justifying doing bad things because they're part of a human organization. And that's what happens to every religion. So it gets convoluted because obviously not everybody was following the Babylonian Talmud, and only the richest people even had the opportunity to commit such atrocities. So, it is what it is, but you see it happening a lot. Anyway, I'm going to jump to the Aral Sea because somebody was talking about California as an island. Oh, California island. Let's start with that. So, map. Okay. California as an island. One of the oldest things we ever talked about. This is one of the things I was like, oh, wait, yeah, of course. Because right around the time that this had happened, I had taken a few classes in environmentalism, environmental science, etc. And the thing that came up was the Aral Sea. So, here's before 1989. Here's after 2014. Now, this whole area, if you went back and looked at it, the same lake in 1960, whatever, this was all water. But as time went on, it disappeared. And this is one lifetime. I know people that used to live here, that still live in this area, but a lot of them have moved away from it. And it's just terrible. It's just super, super sad. This whole lake is just gone. And it was the fourth largest lake in the world. Karapalak. What would name? It was an endorheic lake lying between Kazakhstan in the north and Uzbekistan in the south, which began shrinking in the 1960s and had largely dried up by the early 2010s. The name roughly translates as Sea of Islands, referring to the over 1,100 islands that had dotted its waters. In the Mongolic and Turkish languages, Aral means island or archipelago. The Aral Sea drained basin encompassed Uzbekistan and parts of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, and Iran. Okay, so you gotta imagine, this is everybody's. This is now do Mega Chad, okay? Mega Chad, Africa. Mega Chad, Africa. Okay, so you know the Sahara. Now compare this lake, which we now, we're completely proven is still there, just under sand. It's in the ground now. Look at how many countries that are all impacted by it. And you have to remember there's river systems that run in here. So the river systems, imagine the same thing. Africa was a completely different place with the Mega Chad. And it connected everything. It would be almost, imagine how long it takes to walk across the desert of Africa in a sandstorm. Imagine how quickly you could get from, South Africa to Northwest Africa to Spain by just taking river systems that existed. And there were river systems. I mean, it's just crazy. Same thing in the Aral Sea. See that first? Aral Sea had, this is entirely easy to get from anywhere. There's 1,100 islands every direction. Now there's like 4 tiny lakes, and it's all dry. And it's that book holes, and there's a dry upside down boat in the middle of it. It's really sad. And this happened because they diverted 10% of the water, and maybe it was, I forget exactly if it was 10% or less, but by diverting some of the water, it wasn't raining back down into the center, and so eventually the water just evaporated, didn't have a place to end up. And so over years, it just completely dried out. In the last few years, they've tried to protect some of it, and they've done something to replenish it, and it's just really sad. I mean, and you look at some of the life there. I mean, like, what is this thing? This crazy sturgeon. Look at that crazy thing. I mean, caviar. You guys wonder why caviar is so expensive? I think part of it really has to do with the draining of the Aral Sea and the destruction of all this stuff. But I mean, can you imagine living in the Aral Sea? Beautiful, wonderful. I mean, and now it's desert. So in one generation, we've gone from thinking that this place was, a lagoon land to desert. All right, now California. Okay, so California, according to the old maps, it was like this. Now let's look at some examples of places that look kind of like that today. Florida marshes and swamplands. Here's Florida. To Louisiana, there are marshes and swamplands. Here's an example. Oh, they don't want me to show you that. Okay. How about this? You go to California and you see there's lots of areas like this now. Moss Landing. Let me show you that. Moss Landing, California. I mean, gosh, that's embarrassing, guys. It used to look way nicer. But yeah, you guys notice we have this interesting little set of towers here. If you're from California, you all know that's a lot weirder than we say it is. And let me see if I can find better pictures of the Moss Landing area. I mean, like, it really doesn't look like it used to look even in my lifetime. It's changed a lot. But this is what you end up with. Eventually, it starts to dry out, and then you get to the point where it's just full sand. Let's do Bakersfield. Bakersfield marine layer. Is that something that is going to come up? So you can see there's this coastal mountain, and then there's the interior valleys. The interior valley is not much higher than the coast. This water at one point went over and spilled, and also went around is the main thing. Because here's the Sharktooth Hill in Bakersfield. Sharktooth Hill. What? You mean there's sharks that went right through the line that we supposed was the... I mean, guys, I'm doing my best. I'm sorry. I know it's just simple stuff here. Sharktooth Hill is now used as a general term to describe the hills in the northeast of Bakersfield, California, which contain Miocene marine fossil beds. During the Miocene, the California coastline was greatly receded, and the area surrounding Bakersfield was an embayment. But this, of course, took millions of years, blah, 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 blah. Did it? Did it, guys? Do you think this took millions of years? Do you think that the Aral Sea will be thought of as taking millions of years? Are we really going to pretend that, this dried out? Oh, yeah, but it wasn't us. It took millions of years. It accidentally happened. Okay, I'm going to show you again how California did this with, I've done this in my earlier videos, gold mining California hose. Is that the way I'm going to do this? Boom. So, I mean, this is one of my first videos. I think the first video I ever made. I talked about this subject. So, You got trains, you got tunnels, you got canyons, and on these trains, I mean, imagine the infrastructure that trains bring and rivers bring before trains, because if you don't have the infrastructure for trains yet, because the Chinese haven't installed it or whatever, you haven't found it yet, well, you just have the floating, the floating. Let me see if I can do that. So, gold mining log, plume. Wow, look at all them gold in them hills. Log plume. Is that right? Call it the log ride. History. Log floating. Anything? You guys can watch if you go to odyssey.com/Disney, you can watch my video on the boardwalk and how most amusement parks are just based on old mining equipment that they had there at the time. And I mean, literally, when I was a kid, that was like all that these rides were about. It's like, ooh, the gold mine, the golden roller coaster, where you're in a gold cart that you usually put gold in. So they bring in these hoses, they bring in the water. Look at this first off. Levels drain, because they're literally draining the water. This was all, drained out. And then water, it flows. It goes over the mountain. It fills into, reservoirs underground a lot of the time. So then that's another reason we have so many great lake systems everywhere. And yeah, they completely destroyed California. And in the process of doing this, they sealed up parts of California that were dry, or there were water and it became dry. These lagoon areas became dry. And now another thing is Sahara sand windstorm. Let me show you this. Okay, so California island map. Let me just go show you the picture of California as an island. Again, if this were to fill in, and you can see there's tons of islands, 4 at least here, that are giant, and there's a number more along the way. And this is all the way down to Baja, California. Let me show you Baja, California. I'm typing way too fast. Okay, so you look at California, and this is also what they've done to tell you that this isn't real. They're like, oh yeah, but if you look at California, there really is. There really is kind of this area here where it is split off. It doesn't continue, but it is right there, And so therefore, they must have not meant America. They must have meant Baja, Mexico, right? Now, the thing about that is you look at it, and it goes further up. Let's look at a bigger map. In fact, boom, up here, it goes further up. Okay, so this is what's going on. The water is pouring in. This is not just Baja California. And what you start, again, more of these maps. Boom. Here's Washington to Canada. Here's Toronto. Here's Victoria. So California is looked at more like this giant thing. And afterwards, you have Deseret, right? So Deseret is created, and Deseret map with the honeycomb and the tongue. That's crazy, by the way. That tongue. I always think, I know it's supposed to be a shield, but I just see come on, isn't that more of a, what's that movie? Rocky Horror Picture Show? I don't know. A Mormon Rocky Horror Picture Show. That would be weird. So California to Oregon to Wyoming to Colorado to New Mexico. This was Deseret. And so they wanted to take the area that had been filled in, particularly along that line. They wanted the area that was filled in of the desert. And so that's important to know. Now, when sediment starts to dry up, you have dust bowls. Oops, what happened? Did it just disappear? Oh, man. Hold on, guys. I think I just crashed my browser. Bring it back. In the meantime, I'll dance. Do 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 do. Get this back running. We're just talking about Deseret. Deseret, the Mormon island of Deseret, which is not an island. It's the largest part of the United States, and it was cut back into the shape of an owl because of the control factor. Because, well, you guys can have Deseret nix the coast. We're going to keep the coast. And that's kind of how that went. Boom. Did this work? Great. Okay, Deseret is back. Here's some of the maps. Forgotten Desert maps. World's Desert. Let's see here. Well, I'm going to go Dust Bowl real quick. And you can see the Dust Bowl, kind of like the winds of the Sahara, there was a complete destruction of nature. There's a point when the natives, at the very end of the American Indian period, as you might want to call it, like the point when they've been completely destroyed, they've assisted in this. But by destroying all the infrastructure of roots, and there's no trees to stop the wind, Dust Bowls, I mean, this is like, this is crazy. Can you imagine? You're driving down the road and all of a sudden you're in a sandstorm, you're in a hurricane of dust that's being picked up from marine layers of Burning Man area in Black Rock City. This is just dead fish meal from the sea floor, and it's just blown up, and this is the desert. So that starts to blow in different directions. Here's Boise, Dust Bowls. Boise went in every direction. In completely just look at some of these examples. Up here, Dust Bowl, severe wind erosion, boom. Okay, so it's coming right along the line of Bakersfield into Fresno. So we know that the Dust Bowl existed and caused effects to California in the area where California is supposed to be divided. Now, I want to look at more pictures of that because it's so cool looking. Actually, let me just do it. One. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's just nuts. These imagine though, you get a car for $500, $600, probably $100 back then because they're all used. There's so many, and you just drive out of the city while people throw rocks at you and try to escape, and you get into a collective community, and then this is how you live and die, is just underneath clouds of apocalyptic dust. So Dust Bowl is really nuts, and again, this is all in places where there's infrastructure. Look at these roads. I mean, they're not bad roads, right? So the infrastructure exists, and then there's a collapse. And afterwards, this whole area is covered in dust. Okay, so we know that exists in America already. It's not even just the Sahara, but we know that there are Sahara sands that are in the Amazon River, which is part of the reason why the color is so bright and vibrant, showing either that there was either more proximal, or there was crazier windstorms, or take your pick on the stories of how sands have expanded that far. But the idea of them filling in areas, sand, waves, beach, filling. I want to, because if you've ever seen that movie Endless Summer, where they talk about surfing, the winds, the sand. There's a reason why the seafloor can be flattened out, because the sand's pushed and it flattens out these areas. Okay, that's what I'm getting at here. That sand and water, eventually it'll all flatten out to an extent. So then these are the shark's teeth that we're saying is in Bakersfield. So we're seeing examples of sharks that go huge distances. They go into fresh water at some points if you're a bull shark, but most of these sharks were probably headed into salt water. So it shows that there's salt water, but it could have been fresh water in lagoon areas as well. Probably a bit of both. And these are the levels. Look how we're going not that deep to find shark. So I'd say that this was not as far back as we'd like to say. It's not this multi-million-year-old story. This was within a few generations, maybe like the last couple hundred years, right? So by the 17th century, 18th century, maybe. So there's my pitch on how the lands were filled in. And if you go out there to some of these areas, you'll see plenty of examples of hills in California. Let's do a map. Map. Not that kind of map. Here we go. No, that's fine. Google Maps is fine. Okay, so let's just zoom out for a second and go to California. Okay, way over there. Okay, so then let's turn on satellite. Okay, and then look at this. This water line goes up here, goes up here. I'm going to let you follow that. Perfect triangle point. It's almost as if something was done by man at this point. Anyway, next to Cali, to Calexico, right there. And you cross that line. So you see California was divided like North Korea on purpose. Here's part of it. Here's another part of it. Here's the other part of it, right? And then here is the rest of Deseret that they cut off. So half of, basically you've got Arcadia. You got this tiny little sliver here that's supposed to be the European English territories. And then most of it was France. And then you got the Spanish section. But California, which is the thing that the Spanish is controlling, that's the real empire here. And it's this huge, huge chunk, like a square, essentially. Except for the fact that this natural line, not quite natural, but it follows, look how it follows almost perfectly. And then it just swallows up areas here. Why? Well, because, what's here? Joshua Tree National Park, which is like aliens, the crazy stuff that grows in Joshua trees, the weirdest trees you'll ever see. I mean, it's cactuses and just crazy space life looking stuff. Beautiful place to shoot a music video. I've done several. I love it there. It's great. But Joshua Tree, and then the Salton Sea. Okay. So check out the Salton Sea. How weird is the Salton Sea, guys? That's Disneyland. That's how weird California is. Salton Sea. Okay. So check out the Salton Sea. Boom. Right? Pretty strange area. So it gets you start to notice that there were plenty of these little areas where there was salt, there was dry, there was probably a lot more of the marshland growing there, and now we brought in palm trees. I mean, maybe there were palm trees, but I doubt it, right? When they were brought in. It could have been, though. I mean, and Arabs bringing in palm trees even earlier, so who's to say? But this is what California looks like now in a lot of these areas, and you have these hardy plants that can handle, they can pull the water out, and if they're not, it'll just start to dry out. So California went dry. That's that story. Let me go further to the Spanish literature. Garcia Rodriguez de Montalvo, 1450 to 1505, was a Castilian author who arranged the modern version of the chivalric romance Amadis of Gaul. Originally written in 3 books in the 14th century by an unknown author, Montalvo incorporated a 4th book in the original series and followed it with a prequel, Los Sarios de Esplandian. It is the sequel to that Montalvo is most often noted for, not for the book itself, but because within the book he coined the word California. Montalvo is known to have been referred to by several other names, including blah, 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 blah. Okay. Born in Medina del Campo, the province of Valladolid, Spain, he came from an influential family belonging to the Puino lineage, one of several who dominated Medina's council policy. This lineage came up, okay, so he's a royal, he's important, but he writes this book about these giant Moorish queen giants that run a matriarchy in Californian island, lived in a sort of manner similar to the Amazons, and the Amazons are connected to Atlantis as well by the writings of Herodotus and Plato, and there's a number of different examples. The novel was highly influential in motivating Hernan Cortés and other explorers in the discovery of the island, which they believed lay along the west coast of North America. In 1539, Francisco de Ulloa sailed under the commission of Cortés, explored the Gulf of California and the coast of Baja California Peninsula, determining that it was a peninsula, not an island. Nevertheless, the cartographic misconception of California as an island persisted on many European maps well into the 18th century. Okay, so there you go. There's your official history there. That California was always just misunderstood. Anyway, you guys, I think you've seen the episode where I have Whoopi Goldberg as Khalifa, because Disney has this cute little temple they tore down, because that's what they do. It's like Burning Man. You build it and you tear it down. But, hey, look, giant griffins, man-killing griffins, and this crazy island, which, when you start to look at the Channel Islands and the connection to Channel Islands, and yeah, there were definitely cultures here that were matriarchal, and that's hard for people to handle for some reason. We're going to have to do a whole thing on misogyny and the ending of female warriors at one point in the beginning again. The group of women warriors who fought like men as well. The story of an island paradise filled with gold and pearls was a recurring theme that Montalvo was familiar with. In seeking new lands, Spanish explorers were often led onward after hearing about a land of gold or a land ruled by women. California historian Lynn Townsend White Jr. wrote that they considered this as of yet undiscovered California, a land of Orient with fantastic attributes. The novel about Esplandian and Khalifa's domain had a strong influence on the searching conquistadors who believed that they might find a nation of women and riches somewhere in the edge of the kingdom unknown. In the Greek mythology, Amazons are described as a nation of female warriors who live in kingdoms out of recognized civilization, like Wonder Woman. Women who fight with Greek warriors. They appear in many Greek tales, including those by Homer, and they're usually killed or otherwise subdued by male warriors. Male hostility to the women warriors is expressed by Dictys of Crete, who wrote that the Amazon queen transgressed the boundaries of nature and of her sex. Nikitas Choniates, a medieval Greek historian, wrote that women warriors who fought alongside men in the Second Crusade, riding horses unashamedly astride, rather than modestly side-saddled, dressed as men, and maintained a very warlike appearance. Okay, so, I'm going to go back to this in a second, but I just want a picture of Joan d'Arc, because, duh, come on. Because, yeah, Europeans are talking about this whole issue with female soldiers, but that's like their bread and butter. Granted, though, they did, burn her at the stake, so maybe there is something to that, but Joan d'Arc, super sweet. Crusade, side saddle, legacy. Some of the tales of the Amazon describe them as having darker skin. In Africa, King Musa I of Mali was protected by a black female royal guards on his famous and influential Hajj to Mecca in 1332. Based. Dude. Musa I. Bruh. Mansa Musa. Everybody, one of the wealthiest people in history. Hard to evaluate. We're going to have to do a whole episode on Mansa Musa. He's important. But yeah, the fact that he's where you get that idea that they had women guards. Think about how crazy, that just changed the world. They were like, hey, must be crazy there. Again, and also women guards that are not afraid of men at all. So they were like, Schilteberger wrote in 1440 about a group of non-Caucasian Tatar women, Amazons, Mongol giantess, led by a vengeful princess. Columbus returned to Spain with the story of an island in the Lesser Antilles called Martinino, perhaps Martinique, that was inhabited only by women, a tale told to him by many of the natives of the West Indies. Columbus did not call the Martinino women Amazons, but the comparison was drawn by his contemporaries. When encountering natives in the New World, Spanish explorers were occasionally told of a tribe composed entirely of women. One such tale was related to Cortez about a group of Amazons supposedly living in a province called Quiguatan. Juan de Grijalva was told of the Amazons during his 1518 expedition through Tabasco region of Mexico. Nuno de Guzman followed tales of a nation of women who lived in riches or near the sea, women with whiter skin, who were accounted goddesses by the natives. He describes how they used bows and arrows and lived in many towns. Polk characterized Guzman as driven by lust for sex and riches. His greed and sadism were well known. So, could have been a sexist, but you start to see this idea of women running the show. And it makes sense. In Africa and Baalbek, you have women that are administrators of the system because they're they're educated because they're sitting there, might as well be. B, they're a lot less replaceable, so you want to make sure they're educated. Because men, you can always get another man. Apparently, it looks like the way genetics work. But women become the child birther, so they become very essential. They can have as many children as they can have. So women become administrator class. They're running the running of the house, the managerial theory. Of course, it's going to be women, but also that they're military. That's pretty interesting because, that's crazy. It's not crazy, but it's just that's every single one of these stories. Every one of these stories is that, oh yeah, this other civilization, we have to be afraid of them because their women are strong. I don't know. Just saying. So, Mansa Musa, History of California. We killed the bear. Super sad. I miss you, buddy. Las Sargas Desplandian is the first one, I think. I think we're just looking at, this is the book about him going to California. The New World, they started to refer to it as, right? And the peninsula. So you have all that. Amadis de Gaula, that's the Gaul story we're talking about. Edward Kelly. Like, do we need to do Edward Kelly? We'll have to save Edward Kelly, I feel like. Should we? Oh, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk about Edward Kelly for you guys for a second. So Sir Edward Kelly, also known as Edward Talbot, was an English Renaissance occultist and scryer. He was best known for his work with John Dee and his magical investigations, besides the professed ability to see spirits or angels in a shrew stone or mirror, which John Dee so valued. Kelly also claimed to possess the secrets of transmuting base metals into gold, the goal of alchemy, as well as the supposed Philosopher's Stone itself, the ability to be immortal with the Philosopher's Stone. Legends began to surround Kelly shortly after his death. His flamboyant biography, his relationships with Queen Elizabeth I, Royal Magus Sir John Dee, and the Emperor Rudolph II, and his claims of great alchemical skill, and the ability to communicate with angels have all led to his relative notoriety amongst historians. So, Kelly, Dee, wife swapping, you all heard about it at this point, I feel like. But one of the things I think is interesting is that he came from the Uí Main family in Ireland, so his connection to the, we'll at green again, the Arabic connection to green, the Moorish connection to green, red and green, the Moorish Moroccan colors. John Dee seems to be the guy who influenced Ed de Vere to use mathematics and Masonic mathematics in Shakespeare. So John Dee's the numerologist that we're all looking for. And he went to Bohemia. He was pretty much arrested for not being able to produce the gold that he was said to produce. It could have all been that he was hiding it from them or something. But Rumpelstiltskin is very much John Dee. And something about, 1590. In 1588, rumors circulated that Kelly was arrested by the Emperor of Bohemia for falsely advertising that he could transmute base metals into gold, a skill that Queen Elizabeth could employ. William Cecil wrote to Edward Dyer, an English diplomat, inviting Kelly to return to England and the Queen's service. In 1590 of October, one of his associates, Ralph Lacey, a recusant from Yorkshire, arrived at the court of James VI of Scotland from Prague. He had served the king's grandfather, the Earl of Lennox. The English ambassador, Robert Bowes, was suspicious of him and persuaded James VI to send him back. By 1590, Kelly was living an opulent lifestyle in Europe and enjoying the patronage of nobility. He received several estates and large sums of money from Rosenborg. Meanwhile, he continued his alchemical experiments until he had convinced Rudolph II that he was ready to start producing gold, the purpose of his work. Rudolph knighted him Sir Edward Kelly of Amani and New Lubin on 23rd February of 1590. But it is possible that this happened in 1589. In May 1591, Rudolph had Kelly arrested and imprisoned in Krivoklock. That's a brutal word there. Krivoklock Castle, outside Prague, supposedly for killing an official named Yuri Hunkler in a duel. It's possible that he also did not want Kelly to escape before he had actual chance to produce any gold. In 1595, Kelly agreed to cooperate and return to his alchemical work. He was released and restored to his former status. When he failed to produce any gold, he was again imprisoned, this time in Nevelin Castle in Moist. His wife and stepdaughter attempted to hire an imperial counselor who might free Kelly from imprisonment, but that didn't work out. He poisoned himself in front of his wife and children, according to Rudolph's geologist. Sir Thomas Brown, an acquaintance of John Dee and son Arthur Dee, in correspondence to Elias Ashmole, states that Arthur Dee said that Kelly dealt not justly by his father, and that afterward imprisoned by the emperor in a castle from whence, attempting to come down the wall, he fell and broke his leg. So it could have been that. And then talking to angels, I'm kind of curious about this Arthur D guy. Have you guys ever heard of Arthur D, his son? I don't know anything about him. Arthur D was a physician and alchemist. He became a physician successfully to Tsar Michael I of Russia and King Charles I. So Arthur D, we got to look into this guy. D was the eldest son of John D. As a child, he accompanied his father in travels through Germany, Poland, and Bohemia. After he returned to England, he was placed at Westminster School in 1592 under the tuition of Edward Grant and Camden. Anthony Wood was informed that he had subsequently studied at Oxford, but he took no degree, and it is not known which college he attended. So, here's a guy who worked on the Philosopher's Stone. Megan Piorco, a PhD at Georgia State University, discovered a coded text in one of Dee's alchemical notebooks purporting to contain a recipe for the so-called Philosopher's Stone, a mythical elixir of life capable of changing base metals into gold and silver, and of imparting immortality. Piorco and digital humanities scholar Sarah Lang published the full text in September 2021. It was deciphered that year by the mathematician and cryptologist Richard Bean of University of Queensland. Are you freaking kidding me? That's awesome. Boom. Dude, guys, we're going to read that. The decoded text described the processing of an alchemical egg in an anather. Oh, yeah. An alchemy in anather is a furnace used to provide a uniform and constant heat for alchemical digestion. It also is a pressure stove, a pressure oven, or vacuum oven, a slow-burning furnace popular with alchemists. There you go. Then there must be a wait for the three universal alchemical phases to occur: black, white, and red. If all steps are followed correctly, you have a truly gold-making elixir by whose benevolence all the misery of poverty is put to flight, and those who suffer from any illness will be restored to health. The text states, which alchemy has been regarded as pseudoscience. While alchemy has been regarded as pseudoscience for centuries, a number of academics have voiced an interest in attempting to recreate these experiments. I myself might be down with that. It sounds like something to try. You probably don't want to actually use it. Being immortal sounds kind of lame, but I mean, it'd be cool to know it worked. How scholars cracked a medieval alchemist's secret code. Written in a puzzling Latin cipher, it contains his formula for eternal life from atlasobscura.com. Medieval alchemist secret code. Look this, guys. In summer 2018, Megan Piorco, deep in her research, we just found this out, so we know that. Had a contributor was odd. The fabric and leather-bound manuscript left 31 leaves of both parchment paper. I'm going to look for this guy, this lady's video, guys, and I'll let you know what I find about it. So, we know that there was the other thing. What's the other manuscript? The Voynich manuscript. Never spell. Yeah, no, I did it right. Just didn't believe in myself. Some people connect the Voynich manuscript to John Dee as well. That's not to say it's only him, but I think he bought it or something. There's definitely a John Dee thing there. Yep. Dee and his squire Edward Kelly lived in Bohemia for several years, where they hoped to sell their services to the emperor. However, the sale seems quite unlikely. I don't know. If Bacon did not create the manuscript, as a supposed Dee connection much weakened, look into there, check it out, do what you want. I think it was important to know. There's probably something to this. I mean, the thing about alchemy, I'll go back. The idea of pressure and the earth to produce metals by using heat and electrons are being pushed into a plasmic state. That's both very futuristic science, very modern technology, and very ancient alchemy. All of it at once. So I'm not against it. Could exist. Just wanted to say. Looking at the decoded scripts, the decoded text describes a specific procedure to create an elixir of life. Okay, wait. So it's like a new JSON. The first step is to look at the frequency of the letters, he says. Then, assuming the cipher was a Balasso della Porta, B needed to figure out the keyword. In a Balasso della Porta cipher, the keyword, a password of sorts, to the code, is used to determine how one should substitute letters in the encrypted text. Bean scoured the text for repeated lettered patterns, indicative of repeated Latin words, to reverse engineer the keyword. He finally figured out that the keyword wasn't a single word, but a staggering 45-letter phrase. Sic alter Jason ora felici portibus uiera colco. Translated into English, the text borrowed from an epic poem about Jason the Golden Fleece. Saying, like a new Jason, you will carry away the golden fleece from the happy Colcos. Nice. Mercury, partibus, nuam, et lune. Okay. Combination of computer programs and old school notes to create this document. You guys love cryptography, don't you? It's very exciting when you finally saw what says Bean. He felt like the professor from one of his old favorite books he read as a teenager, Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. It was just like a real cipher, he laughs. And it wasn't about going to the center of the Earth through a volcano in Iceland. That's what he thinks. It totally is. I mean, that's how you do this experiment. The decoded text describes the specific procedure to create the elixir of life, the alchemical egg, the furnace. Okay, so we'll go into this. You guys can read through that more. Now you know. Archive. Athoner. Pigger Henricus. Slow Henry. Tower Furnace. Guys, we're going to need one of these. Ibn al-Haytham. Really key Arab mathematician, astronomer, and physician. What time is it, guys? 7:30. I might be at the end of my rope. I think I'm tired. I think we did a pretty good video. I'm gonna check out my group comments and see what you guys are saying. Top chat. Huh. There we go. Thank you guys for watching all that so far. By the way, I mean, I felt like it's crazy. Thank you. Message me, Odin. Memory Man. I saw it. Angels. Black Mirror. Mac. Heaviest. Dave Matthews tickets. Pressure and Cycles. Pack Machine. Anyone else like Dave Matthews tickets? Dave Matthews tickets really had a huge impact on my perspective of life. Dave Matthews. Mellifluence perfumes, guys. Check them out. They make cool perfume. So I've heard. Kim Chu Poo. Dave Matthews was great. Dave Matthews tickets was great. Okay. Yeah, not bad. All right. So, anybody have any last questions? I'm thinking about doing another one of these. I want to do more of these, just where I just read comments and do my tabs, just empty. Every time I get a bunch of tabs, and I'm just gonna end up closing the whole window of 100 tabs. I should probably do a video like this. That'd probably be the way to go. Man, I got one more. I'm gonna read one more thing for you guys. So the Contendings of Horus and Seth. The Contendings of Horus and Seth is a mythological story from the 20th dynasty of Egypt found in the first 16 pages of the Chester Beatty Papyri. And it deals with the battles between Horus and Seth to determine who will succeed Osiris as king. Looks kind of like this, right? So it's not quite in ancient Phoenician, or it's not quite ancient Egyptian. It's more in like a Phoenician script, later Egyptian. Dates back to 20th dynasty of Ramesses V, likely came from a scribe's collection that was recorded for personal entertainment. The papyrus contains the story of the contendings of Horus and Seth, as well as various other poetic love songs. This story, arguably the most important part of the Chester Beatty papyrus, the first is the mythological story of the contendings of Horus and Seth, which deal with the battles between Horus and blah, 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 blah. We just said this. The specific time of the contendings is a period during which the fighting has temporarily stopped Seth and Horus from have brought their case before the Ennead. Oh, yeah. Remember we were talking about the Ennead? Check out the Ennead, a group of 9 deities. Instead of a single lord, it's like a courthouse of 9. The Great Ennead was one of several such groups of 9 deities in ancient Egypt. It claimed its preeminence, but Heliopolitan, again with the priest, the Sun City priest, and were not respected throughout Egypt. As close as Memphis, the priests of Ptah celebrated him as superior to the 9. Okay, so Ennead's important on that level. They were trying to figure out who's going to succeed Osiris. Throughout this story, Horus and Seth have various competitions to see who will be king. Horus beats Seth every time. The beginning of the story is a sort of trial when both Seth and Horus plead their cases and the deities of the Ennead state their opinions. Later in the story, Seth fights with Horus, and after several long battles, Horus finally wins and becomes king. So, I mean, that was a lot less romantic and dramatic than it could have been, but that's a story to look into. It's pretty important because when we look at the transition of these characters and we talk about the Gnostics making God into like, oh, this is a new God, right? Because this is the way God is in reflection of humanity's change. So is it God that changes, or is it really just humanity that changes, and therefore it changes its perspective and says, oh, we need to retire words? Could be. But yeah, I thought that was important. You should see how they transition religions. Thank you guys for tuning in. Go to tartarinova.com. Get on the Discord. I mean, get on the Matrix server at this point. Use the Discord to get the link into the Matrix server. It's like room 1 of the many, and you'll never be censored again. It's going to be really weird in a few months when we're building the new Matrix protocol code for Twitter. Like, who saw that coming? All right. Love you guys. Peace. All right. Yeah. Peace.